The asteroid belt rests between Mars and Jupiter like a gentle veil, a cradle of silence around the sun. In that wide band of rock and ice, ancient travelers circle in endless night. They drift the way snow drifts across a field, slow and timeless. Some are bright and clean. Others are dark, pitted, and cold. Each carries the memory of the early solar system, like old letters kept in a box no one opens. Starlight touches them and slides away. The void hums with nothing and with everything at once. On a calm night, a drifting shadow appears. It is not loud or bold. It simply moves, soft as a brush stroke across the sky. A telescope catches it first, not by sight but by subtraction. A star that should be steady flickers. The light dips, not like a planet passing, not like a comet's tail. It dips as if something wide and mist-like glides between star and mirror. The log shows the curve of the dip, small but clear. The night stays quiet, yet the data's whisper grows. The voice inside the dome stays calm. It speaks in numbers and time marks. The team has watched the belt this season because perihelion is near for many small bodies. They expect dust. They expect thin wakes shining like fog. They expect the slow choreography of orbit and gravity. But the curve on the screen is strange. It bends like a feather, not a stone. It arrives earlier than the predicted path, and it leaves later, as if dragged by an unseen hand. The shadow passes again the next night. The dip repeats, but not in the same way. The telescope holds steady. The starlight drops, soft and smooth, then rises with a tremble, like a breath. A spectrograph listens. It does not hear a sound, but it tastes the light. In the light are hints of iron, of silicates, and something else, an anomaly that does not match simple dust. The line is faint, older than memory, or so it seems to eyes that have listened to many stars. If you are listening as you drift towards sleep, that's why these stories exist. Subscribe, and share where you are and what time it is. I read them new. York at midnight, London before dawn, Sydney at noon like stars across the earth. And in that map I see the watchers who keep the night. Telescopes across Earth begin to look. A mountain in Chile, a desert in Namibia, a valley in Hawaii, an ice blue station at the edge of the world. Even a small scope on a city roof adds its gaze to the sum of all gazes. Each one points at a seemingly empty wedge of the belt, a place where small bodies should be harmless and plain. Instead, they find a soft glow near perihelion, a glow that seems too smooth. It is not a comet, though it acts like one. It is not a nebula, though it drifts like cloud. Its trajectory bends near a cluster of stones. Then it moves as though the cluster is not there. Numbers sharpen the picture. The orbit is almost circular, but not quite. The anomaly rides ahead of a faint body that might be an asteroid or a comet. At first, people suspect a dust sheet, thrown off by a fresh collision. Dust would explain the dip in starlight. Dust would scatter light and make a fog. Yet the curve of the dip is too clean, the edges too kind. Dust is messy. Dust is noise. This seems like a signal, like a messenger crossing a calm lake without a ripple. Some say plasma. The sun's wind streams through the belt. Magnetic lines twist and snap. A sheet of charged particles could glow softly and bend trajectories like streamers pulled by a breeze. Spectrographs test that thought. The lines they see half fit and half refuse. Where plasma should sharpen, the data blurs. Where dust should blur, the data becomes sharp. The anomaly does not sit still under any old name. Nights pass. The voice inside the dome keeps its steady tone, guiding awe toward hope. You can imagine yourself there, in the cool air, listening to fans, watching the beam mark each second. You hear the click of the shutter and the quiet click of a pen against a notebook. Starlight comes from so far away that each photon feels like a memory arriving late. The screen paints each point and builds a new shape from patient light. The sky does not hurry. The anomaly arrives again, a drifting shadow shaped like a smile that forgot how to end. The team tracks its path near perihelion, where the sun's pull is strongest and motion turns sharp. If this were a normal object, its speed and curve would follow the book. But the path shows small hesitations, like a walker touching a wall as they pass. Each hesitation lines up with a gap in the stones of the belt. Each soft pause hums with that faint spectrographic line, the one that feels older than memory. Is it old? Age in space is tricky. A rock can be ancient but bright. A comet can be young but tired. The anomaly does not show scars or pits, because it is not seen directly. It is only known by how it changes light. In the data, it looks like a soft hand placed upon a star, then lifted. Someone writes in the margin, "Harbinger?" Someone else crosses it out and writes, "Unexplained." Astronomers are careful. They repeat the measures. They ask other telescopes to check. They share exposure times and calibration frames. They hold their breath through the long upload of raw files across oceans. A radio dish listens for a neutrino burst, just to be thorough. There is none. An X-ray instrument scans for a flare. Nothing. The anomaly seems to live only in the gentle band of visible light and the faintest infrared glow, like warm breath on a cold window. The idea of a wormhole passes through the room the way lightning passes through a cloud, quick, bright, and gone. Wormholes are not bedtime stories, yet people know the shape of them from movies and dreams. A wormhole would be no soft curve. It would be a tearing of distance. It would twist starlight in a clear, cruel way. The data shows no twist, only kindness. If a door exists here, it is a door that refuses to slam. So the voice in the dome returns to what is sure: orbit, trajectory, starlight, time. The anomaly circles with a period that matches a small asteroid nearby. The asteroid itself is unremarkable, a stone, an ice lump, a traveler with little to say. But its companion shadow gives it a strange dignity, like a small boat followed by a long wake that glows. People name the pair in their notes in quiet ways, never official, just affectionate. The boat and the veil, the lantern and the fog. The public does not know yet. This is not a headline, it is a hum. Discovery often begins with something that looks like a nuisance in the data, then becomes a friend you can't ignore. The team moves from awe to care. They plot windows when the object rises. They plan follow-up with a spectrograph that has a finer ear. They ask for time on a telescope that can taste infrared more deeply, because warmth reveals stories that light alone keeps hidden. On a roof under city glow, a small telescope watches too. The operator is young, but careful. They learn to find the signal not by staring at the sky, but by trusting the graphs. When the dip appears on their screen, they feel the quiet shock of being part of a larger gaze. The feeling is fragile and timeless, a human hand on a knob, a human eye on a screen, a human mind wondering if the universe just exhaled. Across the belt, nothing else stirs. The stones continue their loops. The sun rolls the seasons forward. A distant exoplanet pulls at its moons. A nebula spreads its wings of dust in slow motion. All of it is calm. The anomaly keeps to its path. It is a polite ghost, never shouting, never vanishing, always a little ahead of where the math thinks it should be. In the lab, someone overlays the curves from different nights. They see the dips line up like waves. The edges feel, if such a thing can be felt, thoughtful. A curve like this could be a sheet of fine grains pulled into order by a magnetic field. It could be the breath of a comet that no longer has a heart. It could be something we do not have a word for yet, a messenger that learned to carry light on its back without breaking it. A memory rises from old papers, a similar dip recorded decades ago near a different cluster, dismissed as noise. The team retrieves the file. The curve is cousins with the new one, softer, thinner. The spectrograph from that era had a rough ear. It missed the quiet line. The past speaks and the present listens. If this has happened before, it may happen often. If it happens often, why did no one see it? The answer may be simple. Eyes were busy with brighter things. So the search widens. They look for siblings of the curve in archives. They scan comet tails and asteroid wakes. They checked for correlations with solar wind spikes, with the turning of Jupiter's magnetosphere, with small showers of meteors on Earth. Patterns appear like constellations drawn between scattered points. None are perfect. All are suggestive. The anomaly does not obey a single master. It moves as if it remembers several rules at once and chooses gently among them. Night after night, the voice in the dome stays kind, guiding fear toward wonder, tension toward hope. If the shadow is a harbinger, then perhaps it brings not danger, but a new way to listen. Perhaps it teaches that starlight carries more than brightness, that it also carries stories about soft things, thin things, hidden where our eyes once slid past. If this omen is real, what reply might the sky give next, and which eyes first learn to see it? Somewhere, a watcher blinks toward dawn, and the data finishes its quiet journey across cables and cloud. The curves wait on screens like tide lines on sand. The glow fades back into the belt, leaving the stones to circle on. The instruments settle. The dome closes against the morning chill. And in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Under a luminous haze, the night settles over mountaintops and desert flats. Small observatories breathe to life. Giant arrays swivel on steel shoulders. Glass as old as volcanoes points toward the asteroid belt, that gray river between Mars and Jupiter. In quiet control rooms, red lights glow like embers. Someone adjusts a focus ring. Someone else taps a pencil against a notebook where neat lines climb like hills. The sky seems still, but it isn't. Starlight crosses the dark like patient rain, and in that rain, tiny ripples whisper of motion you cannot see. They listen for faint echoes carried by light. When a meteor flares, its bright line is a scratch on the film of night. When a comet wanders past, its tail opens like a veil, a soft flag in the solar wind. Even these brief shows are measured. Brightness, angle, speed, the way a glow blooms and fades. The telescopes gather it all. Every photon is a traveler with a story. Photometry turns those stories into numbers. Pixel by pixel, night after night, the watchers map a pattern that should not be there. It begins as a dip, a gentle lowering of light from a scattering of rocks. Then another dip, farther along the belt. Then another, as if something smooth and vast is moving through the crowd, leaving a drifting shadow on many stones at once. The dips recur, not across a single star, but across a shared path. That is what unites the points on the map, a trajectory that threads them like beads. At first, they suspect what they always suspect: weather, the thin mood of the atmosphere. Heat can wobble the air into mirages. Dust can ice the lenses. A sensor can blink, but the instruments hum steady. The mirrors are clean. The pattern returns on clear nights and hazy nights, at sea level, and on peaks where the air is thin and sharp. If this is noise, it is a very patient kind. Data arrives in slow, steady waves. In the cradle of silence, the spectrograph draws thin lines like quiet music, showing how the sunlight reflects from rock and ice. A narrow band deepens. Another brightens. Sodium sighs. Iron hums. The watchers read the lines like a melody that almost makes sense. They whisper to each other, keeping voices low, not because the sky can hear, but because the room feels like a library built for starlight. They model orbits the way a sculptor shapes clay, pushing here, trimming there, testing how a curve fits the evidence. They refine perihelion timings, the moments when an object swings closest to the sun and the sunlight sharpens its face. Each small world wears its own clock. They compare those clocks to the dips, those soft steps down the brightness ladder. Some clocks match, some miss by minutes or days. They keep working, because patience is the first rule of sky watching. The arrays turn with practiced grace. Radio dishes listen for static storms in the solar wind. Optical telescopes fill hard drives with a soft rain of counts. On another continent, an all-sky camera catches an unexpected streak and pages a grad student who sleeps in a sweater at her desk. She blinks awake, yawns, and checks the plot. It's not a streak after all. It's a notch, a little bite taken from a star's steady shine. And it happens at the moment another notch appears in a different observatory's data. Two places, same instant. The shared trajectory holds. The watchers test every simple idea first. Could a swarm of dust be drifting near Earth, casting a local shadow? They check the moon's position. They check the station's dome, the vents, the fans that breathe warm air out. They change filters and exposure times. Still, the belt dips on schedule, like waves crossing a shallow bar. They look outward. Maybe a series of small dark objects is traveling together. Asteroids sometimes flock after collisions. Debris can follow a leader like small fish behind a ray. But the spacing is wrong, too even, almost kind. In their charts, the dips line up along a curve that obeys a simple law. The way a thrown stone obeys the pull of Earth. The watchers respect simple laws. They build their nights on them. Yet the simplicity here feels designed. That word sits like a warm coal on the tongue. They let it cool. They keep testing. On a chalkboard, chalk dust hangs in the air like pale nebulae. An orbit equation arcs across the slate. Someone adds a term for pressure from sunlight, tiny but real. A steady push on dust and thin metal. A hand you can feel only over the span of months. The term improves the fit. The dips snap closer to the model path. The watchers nod, not in triumph, but in calm relief. A universe that answers to math is a universe that lets you sleep. The sun turns, throwing slow fire toward the belt. The solar wind murmurs, invisible and always there, curling around magnetic fields like a river around a stone. Instruments hear that murmur as faint hiss and gentle drift in their plots. When the wind strengthens, some dips grow wider, as if the shadow's edge softens. When the wind eases, the edge sharpens again. Whatever travels there, if anything travels at all, seems to feel the wind. Spectra build a history of color. The rocks of the belt reflect sunlight in tones of gray and rust and faint blue. On nights when the dips pass, the color changes by a hair, a whisper of coolness, as if a veil slid between rock and star. The watchers log in. Delta color, tiny, persistent. They draw a small star in the margin next to the note, not for decoration, but as a marker. Look here later. Patience makes room for wonder. At the eyepiece, or on a screen that is mostly black with dots, you learn to see not only what is bright, but what is missing. The missing is where secrets hide. The missing is what pulls a thought forward, like a tide tugging a boat from its mooring. If this is not noise, someone says softly, then what fortress of physics hides behind the shimmer? It's a gentle question, and it leaves a gentle silence afterward, the kind that lets the brain breathe. The watchers think about fortresses, gravity wells, resonance chains, invisible shepherds that keep rings in place. Saturn holds its rings with small moons that nudge and gather, unseen at first, later found by the way they shaped the ice. Could the belt have a shepherd? Not a moon, but a pattern, an arrangement that redirects sunlight, or drinks it, or scatters it into music too faint for human eyes. The mind drifts, then returns to the page. Return is part of the craft. They test the instruments again. A laser checks each mirror's curve. A cold finger settles over a camera to keep the noise down. The clock's thousands of dollars of clock tick together to within millionths of a second. Across the ocean, another telescope waits for the same moment to see if the dip arrives on schedule. It does. Slightly deeper. Slightly longer. Enough to raise eyebrows, not alarms. Numbers become lines. Lines become maps. Maps become stories told in a quiet voice to a room where chairs squeak and pens click and the coffee tastes like burnt stars. In the story, the ancient traveler is not a comet but a shadow, a drifting shape that seems to cross many rocks at once, as if a single, gentle hand moves above them. The hand leaves no heat, no tail, no flare of ionized gas. It leaves only the soft step down, then the soft step up, a footfall on light. The belt is old. It holds memories of collisions and near misses, of worldlets that almost were. The watchers carry their own memory-long nights. Papers read until the text blurs. Childhoods that began with faces pressed to cold windows, counting stars until numbers ran out. They honor that memory by being careful. They share data. They argue with kindness. They name their uncertainty because naming it is a form of truth. And they imagine, not fairy tales, but futures. A probe sailing through the belt on ion engines, tasting the dust, measuring the shadow, letting its spectrograph draw sharper music. Or maybe fleets of small telescopes, cheap and brave, spread all over the earth, catching every dip and weaving them into a complete shape. The future extends like a bridge made out of questions. Tonight, the graphs sing low and even. The dips recur. The shared trajectory holds, bending to gravity like a reed to wind. In the model, small corrections tighten the curve. Someone sketches a simple figure on a sticky note, a dotted path, a thin gray oval, a small arrow that hints at direction. They pin it above the monitor. It is not proof. It is a promise to keep looking. You, listening in the soft glow of your own room, might picture the belt as a quiet crowd. Each rock turns, slow as a thought. A gentle veil moves across their faces, and for a moment the light dims, not enough to alarm, just enough to be felt by machines trained to feel the faintest things. This is how science often begins, not with a shout, but with a hush, not with a blaze, but with a slight change in tone. The hours pass. The earth spins. Dawn waits beyond the ridge, pale and patient. Inside, they run one more check, and one more after that, because a mystery is a living thing and needs careful tending. Data becomes story, and story becomes question. And the question is not a threat, but an invitation. What else could shape light like this? What else could move so quietly and so true? The last exposure finishes. A fan winds down. The dome slits close with a soft sigh, as if the building itself is breathing. The watchers step outside, and the air is cold and clean. Venus glows low, a small torch on the edge of day. In their pockets are the night's simple treasures, numbers, times, tiny dips along a path through scattered rock. They don't know yet what made them. They don't have to. Not tonight. Above the mountains, the sky lightens from black to blue. The belt is invisible now, but it is there, and whatever moved through it left a trace no sunrise can erase. The glow fades on the western rim, and with it the rustle of instruments, the whisper of the wind. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The pages open with a sigh. Dust lifts in a gentle veil, and ink the color of old tea lies quiet under a lamp. In these yellowed logbooks, starlight from another century waits. A finger trails along narrow lines. Names of stars. Dates written with firm care. Small drawings of the sky like tiny maps. Between them, a soft puzzle repeats. a star that blinked, a tiny pause in the night, a drifting shadow where none was expected. They wrote it simply, the way careful people speak when they want the truth to stand on its own. Star fainted for 1 second. Light slowed, as if behind a thin cloud. Possible occultation near the minor planets. The words are calm and spare, but the wonder is clear like wind across a quiet pond. People with cold hands and tired eyes sat beside fragile telescopes. Glass ground by patient lives gathered the sky and sent it into notebooks and memory. Sometimes it happened near the asteroid families, where many small worlds share a broad lane around the sun. A point of light would suddenly vanish and then return, crisp as before. Not a comet with a tail. Not an asteroid on a familiar orbit. The shadow moved like an ancient traveler with no name. The logbooks call it an anomaly, an unexplained messenger, a harbinger, and then fall back to silence, letting the sky finish the sentence. Meteor showers filled some nights with quicksilver tracks. The watchers wrote those down to Perseid Leonid showers that arrive on time, like friends who never forget. But in the quiet between meteors, a strange note kept singing. A missed star here, a dimming there. The notes did not match any comet ephemeris or asteroid trajectory available to them. Each time, the old observers did the humble thing. They blamed their own tools. They checked lenses for frost. They cleaned the eyepiece with a breath. They wondered if their watch was slow. And then they waited for the next clear night. The telescopes were thin bones of brass and wood. Their lenses, small and easily bruised. Yet on these fragile instruments fell the work of measuring the universe angles no wider than a hair held at arm's length. Time kept by a clock that needed winding. Charts drawn by hands that ached when winter set in. Still, they tracked. They sketched. They watched stars wink out as the moon rolled past. They knew how an occultation should look, a crisp edge, a fall, a return. But this drifting shadow near the asteroids did not behave. It did not keep the neat schedule of a planet. It did not carry the soft haze of a comet. It arrived the way a thought arrives in a dream, clear, and yet somehow hard to place. One log shows a careful domino of notes over 3 weeks. Cloud, then clear. A bright meteor. A faint star near a catalog number. Then the line, star lost for heartbeat, reappeared. No tail seen. No companion. The next page, a drawing. A dot, a dashed line, a tiny scrawl. Possible object? Across the ocean, a different shelf holds a different book that tells the same little story in a different hand. Starlight went thin, like breath on glass. The language differs. The awe is the same. You can almost hear the rooms where they worked. A chair sliding a little. The rustle of maps. A kettle whispering in the corner. Someone stepping outside to fill the night and to check that the air is clear of haze. They look up. Stars are steady. The Milky Way hangs like a pale river. And still, in the place where the asteroids move, something shifts through the field, too faint for a shout, too real to ignore. The old watchers lift their eyes from paper to sky and back again, trapped in the quiet joy of a mystery that refuses to be loud. They did not know the words we use now. They could not talk about exoplanets with certainty, though some guessed. They did not speak of Trojan clusters by name, or of the detailed families within the asteroid belt. Yet they felt patterns without the modern map. Their hands found them in the records. A few months later, a note returns to the same idea. Again near Juno's path. Again along the shared orbit. The careful ones wrote coincidence. The brave ones wrote pattern. And the most patient left a gap on the page, as if allowing the future a place to write its answer. Now, in the present, the same sky is brighter with cities but louder with tools. We carry spectrographs that sort starlight into fine threads. Camera arrays collect the night with a steadiness no hand can match. Computers trace orbits the way a tide traces a shore. When these old notes are scanned and shared, their small signs become data points. Modern software lays the logbooks over star maps and years. It asks, if a drifting shadow crossed here and again there, how might it move? What orbit would hold such behavior? What trajectory would explain a star that dims not by a sharp edge, but by a soft passing veil? The answers are not quick. If the object were a simple rock, it would carry a stable path and return in the way rocks do. If it were a comet, its coma and tail would change the light with a familiar signature. But the logbooks say neither. They describe a soft touch, a shadow that feels like a thin curtain sliding across a window. And when the logbooks agree, when pages written decades apart hum in tune, a small bell rings in the mind. If records agree across centuries, is that chance or is it design? Design is a heavy word, and the old writers do not use it with ease. They speak instead about messengers, about harbingers, about the way the universe sometimes whispers before it speaks. We are careful too. We imagine an object the size of a large house, or a swarm of particles like a loose cloud, or the leftover breath of something stranger. We imagine a sheet of dust carried by a minor body we have not yet catalogued. We imagine a fragment from a collision that learned to travel with the families and then learned to drift. We imagine and then we test. The tests are gentle and slow, like the turning of a planet. Modern observers watch fields near the asteroid belt and wait for starlight to briefly fade. They measure how fast the fade begins, how long it lasts, how the star returns. They compare the curve to old drawings and notes that speak with few words but sure hands. If the shapes match, then time has tied a thread from a cold night long ago to tonight's warm screen. If they do not, the thread is cut and we begin again. Some nights, a soft match seems to appear. A little dip in the light, smooth and short. A path that glides near the shared orbits. It is tempting to say, we have it. But the sky asks for humility. It reminds us that the Earth's air can pretend, that a thin cloud can fool a lens, that instruments have ghosts. So the scientists repeat the watch. The data grow. The noise falls away like silt sinking to the bottom of a clear pool. In the logbooks, hidden among the notes, are small acts of kindness toward the unknown sentences where a writer thanks the night for being steady or apologizes to the sky for a shaky hand. These lines do not help with math. They do help with courage, because the work is often waiting, waiting for orbit, waiting for weather, waiting for a shadow that may never pass again. Yet the old watchers kept the lamps burning and kept the pages turning. In their simple words lies a faith that the universe meets patience with pattern. And what of the messenger? The faint traveler that neither shines nor shouts? No one in these books gives it a name. Perhaps it is best to leave it nameless a little longer. Without a name, it can stay a question. Without a label, it can remain a place where awe lives. The past leans forward across the table. On its breath is the dry scent of paper and the cool of night air through a cracked window. It offers clues in careful script. Look here, it says. Look again. Tonight, modern eyes look. The asteroid family sweep along their broad avenue. Starlight arrives from far beyond, steady and quiet. Instruments wait with open hands. Somewhere, a small thing may cross a distant beam and cast a gentle, drifting shadow. If it does, the record will grow by one more line. If it does not, the silence will still be full of meaning, because the search itself is a kind of message, a promise that we will keep listening to the cosmic whisper, even when it feels more like a breath than a voice. There is a comfort in this loop across time. People once leaned over these pages by lamplight. We lean over screens with the same soft hope. Their words are our beginning. Our tools are their dream. Together, they make a path that feels almost like a prophecy, drawn not in thunder, but in pencil. Watch the places where many small worlds share the sky. Watch for a dimming that does not shout. Keep kindness for the unknown. In the end, the logbooks do not give answers. They offer a way to move through wonder without breaking it. They teach a rhythm: observe, note, compare, and rest. They remind us that the universe is patient and that we can be, too. And when the night grows very quiet and the stars seem sharper than usual, it is easy to believe that the old watchers are still here, behind us, pointing at a small line on a page and smiling. The lamp goes low. The last page closes with a soft thud. Outside, the sky keeps its slow turn. Somewhere along the shared orbits, a traveler may be moving, hidden and lightless, crossing beams we have not yet learned to watch. The glow fades against the horizon of thought, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind and in the drifting quiet. One could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. He speaks in a voice like low tide, the kind that smooths sharp stones into quiet. He begins not with math, but with an image. Space is not a hard plate. It is a soft sheet. Lay a marble on it, and the sheet dips. Roll another marble nearby, and the second curves toward the dip. Gravity is not a chain pulling down, but a gentle curve guiding motion. Time, he says, is the slow river running along the sheet, flowing everywhere, never stopping, sometimes moving a little faster, sometimes a little slow. What, then, is a wormhole? Not a comet with a blazing tail and a clear orbit. Not a black hole with a hunger that traps even light. A wormhole is a tunnel, a bridge, a secret corridor through the fabric itself. Put two distant valleys on a map. The road between them winds and climbs. But if the map can fold, the valleys touch. A wormhole is the fold. Space bends. The distance shrinks. The door opens where no door should be. He does not hurry. He lets the image rest. The room is dim. The screen shows a calm stream of starlight. He says, in the sky, distances are a kind of dream. Light from a star may be hundreds or thousands of years old before it touches a telescope. Galaxies drift like ancient travelers. Nebulae sleep in the dark, soft clouds. Exoplanets turn around suns we cannot step near. The universe speaks in light, and the light is patient. To hear that voice, people listen for rhythms in the noise. Pulsars, dead stars that spin tick like clocks against the night. Each pulse is a whisper that says, I am here, I am turning, I am old. Astronomers watch those ticks for tiny delays. A heavy thing passing between us and the pulsar will stretch the path of the pulses. Gravity makes the river meander. From small changes in timing, they learn to see the unseen. A massive companion, a drifting cloud, a background wave. The work was slow, but it taught them to look with their ears. Then came lensing, the way gravity bends light, the way glass bends rays in a lens. A galaxy cluster is a giant magnifying glass, distorting the glow behind it into arcs and mirrored drops. On a map of the sky, those arcs draw a story about hidden mass. Dark matter, which no one has touched, shapes the curves like a puppet master behind a veil. In those maps, the universe reveals its scaffolding. The largest structures pull on light, and light obeys as if the rules were gentle but firm. Supernova added scale. A star dies and brightens the universe for a brief week, then fades like a memory. By measuring how stretched its light becomes how the wavelengths slide toward the red. Astronomers learn how fast the space between is growing. The more the light is stretched thin, the farther the source and the older the message. Time speaks through color, like a sunset telling you the day is older than it seems. These tools, pulsar timing, lensing, the maps of clusters, the thin red silk of supernova light set a stage. They do not prove a wormhole, but they teach how to listen for one. If such a door exists, it would not cast the shadow of a solid thing. A comet leaves a trail. A black hole warps a region and feeds. A wormhole, if it could live at all, would be delicate and strange. It would bend starlight in a pattern that does not match the pull of ordinary mass. It would echo with a geometry that feels forbidden, as if a line had been drawn where a line cannot be. He pauses. On the screen, a starfield glows like frost. He says, imagine it moving slowly, not in some far galaxy, but nearer, inside the broad ring of our own asteroid belt. That belt is not crowded like stories say. It is a wide, spare dance, rocks scattered over 1,000,000 paths. Could a hidden tunnel drift there? A quiet door among drifting shadows? The thought is bold. But science is allowed to be bold when it stays calm and checks the light. What would the light say? A wormhole changes the rules for a ray passing near. Light would bend, but not just bend. It might split, arrive in the wrong order, carry the same image twice at 2 times, or whisper with a delay that fits no normal path. A background star that should be steady could bloom and fade in a way that does not match a planet crossing or dust drifting by. The curve of its brightening would be wrong. The way footsteps on wood differ from footsteps on stone. The universe has tones. You can tell which one you walk upon. He draws a simple sketch, 2 dots, a line, a loop, and the air feels lighter. Time around a wormhole mouth may slow down, like a leaf caught in a back eddy. If 2 mouths could exist and stay open, a signal might go out one door and come in the other, dancing around the rules that usually hold us. No one has seen this. No instrument has taken a clear picture. But the rules of gravity, written in clean lines a century ago, say such bridges are not forbidden by the math alone. The trouble is keeping them open, keeping them from collapsing like a tunnel in sand. The plan, then, is simple in shape, but hard in practice. Watch the light. Watch many stars at once. Let a wide-field telescope drink the sky every night. Catch each flicker and ask each flicker what caused it. Most will be known things: comet trails, asteroid glints, a planet pulling its small eclipse, random noise. A few will be odd. For the odd ones, bring out the spectrograph, the tool that spreads light into its many notes. In that spread, colors fall into a barcode. The lines and gaps tell what the light passed through, how fast the source moves, how the path stretched. In the barcode of a bent star, a wormhole might leave a secret. It could shift parts of the spectrum in ways no lens of normal mass would. It could make 2 barcodes where there should be 1, or delay the echo of color by seconds or hours. It could paint thin, mirrored bands where gravity alone would paint thick, continuous ones. The shapes would be subtle. The eye would miss them, but a patient algorithm might not. He reminds the room that people have tried to tease out such signs using old surveys, like turning a radio dial through static to hear a word that might not be there. Some claimed hints, patterns in noisy data, shadows that looked like doors. But when teams returned with better instruments and clean calibration, the patterns softened into dust and wish. This is how learning works. The night is large. The mind is eager. But truth gets to move slowly. Still, the dream does not dim. Think of a small craft in the outer belt, a probe the size of a car, shaped like a seed. It turns its dish toward a thin anomaly, a field where starlight behaves like a lost messenger looking for home. The craft drifts, silent in the cradle of space. Its sensors wait. If a wormhole mouth passes, the stars behind would ripple. The probe would feel no wind. It would hear no chime. But its camera would catch light bending along a wrong curve, and its clock would notice a delay too neat to be random. Such a detection would change everything, and yet the sky would look the same. He speaks of caution. A wormhole is not a shortcut for a weekend trip. It may need exotic matter to prop its throat open, matter that acts as if it has negative weight, pushing when other things pull. This is not material anyone has held in a jar. The idea stands like a fragile bridge in fog, possible in math, hard in the world. But the search itself is not fragile. It is solid work. Watch, compare, test, repeat. In the calm drift of his words, the asteroid belt becomes a stage for patience. Rocks move in their quiet orbits. Sunlight glances off broken faces. Between those glances, there is room for an unexplained curve, for a soft anomaly that hints at a door. The telescopes on Earth blink through weather. Space telescopes blink through darkness. Blink by blink, the catalog grows: arc, flare, dip, lens, dust, mirror, echo. He tells a small story from the past. Once, long ago, people thought the odd wobble of a star might be caused by a companion too dim to see. They watched year after year until the wobble repeated and settled into a pattern. The companion was real, a planet, an exoplanet, a world they would never touch, yet could weigh with a pen. The lesson stayed: when the signal is faint, time is your friend. So the chapter of the wormhole, if it is ever written in the book of real things, will be written the same way, with patience, with instruments, with many eyes. If the door that bends the night is out there, it will not shout. It will answer starlight with a wayward reply, with a pattern just wrong enough to catch the careful ear. It will not cast a shadow a child can see on the wall. It will leave a trace in the hush between photons. He closes the sketch. The room dims a little more. Outside, the world spins under its thin veil of air. Somewhere, a pulsar ticks. Somewhere, a galaxy cluster lenses a distant glow into a ghostly ring. And here, in this small pool of soft glow and quiet breath, a new habit grows. Look for the strange bend in ordinary light. Listen for an echo that arrives a beat late, as if it had taken a narrow street where the map shows none. Maybe the door is only an idea, a clean fold in a page that does not like folding. Or maybe, out beyond Mars, past drifting gravel and silent monoliths, the fabric has gathered itself into a throat of night, sighing, holding, whispering. The instruments will go on listening. The river of time will go on flowing. And in that river's gentle sound, the mind will keep leaning, wondering whether a hidden path is already parting the current almost felt, almost seen and weather in the drifting quiet. One could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Night opens like a slow curtain, and the sky fills with careful points. Starlight travels across a cold ocean of space, slips through air, passes prisms and mirrors, and finally lands on quiet detectors. In labs and rooftops and desert domes, the beams arrive as lines and dots, as numbers on a screen, as tiny changes in brightness that feel like the pulse of a faraway heart. The world sleeps. The instruments keep watch. Most nights bring the usual rhythm. An asteroid glides in front of a star, and the light drops fast, like a breath held for a moment, then rises again. Astronomers call it an occultation, neat and brief, the kind of dip that matches the size and speed of a known rock. These dips are tidy signatures, the kind you can frame with a simple model and a steady hand. But the anomaly is not tidy. It does not snap off the light like a switch. Instead, it paints a softer, longer shadow. The edges of the dip shimmer, a fringe of light as if the star is brushed by a thin lace. The curve bends gently down, pauses, and then climbs again without a clean corner. It looks less like a coin passing a lamp and more like a veil moving through a beam, a gentle fabric in a slow breeze. Spectrographs, those careful rulers of color, listen for extra signs, If it were a comet, there would be the faint breath of gas-carbon bands, a whisper of cyan, a little halo that glows around the nucleus. But the spectra show no gas tail, no cometary glow, no lines that shout dust and ice. Only a patient dimming, spread across all colors as if the entire star grows quiet by the same small amount. Color stays calm. Intensity bows its head. The team checks for noise. They run the pipeline twice, then a third time. They pull data from another telescope on another mountain under another sky. The shape remains soft, longer, shimmering at the edges. And then, in a separate set of nights, the pattern repeats. No visible body shows up in deep images. No drifting rock reveals itself as the culprit. Still, the light goes down and back up with the same tender curve, like a memory repeating in sleep. If light is our messenger, they ask, what message does it carry? The observer breathes slowly over the console. This is the only voice the distant object has. A change in brightness, a change in time. No radio ping, no silhouette in a camera, only the rhythm of a star's glow thinner, thicker, thinner again. Models gather like guests at a quiet table. Someone tries black hole microlensing a small mass-bending space, warping light, turning the star into a lensing arc so subtle you would miss it if you blinked. Microlensing can cause brightening as well as dimming, a brief swell rather than a dip, and the shape it draws is sharp in one place, smooth in another. The anomaly curve looks similar from far away, but step closer and it fails to match. The timings are off. The slope is kinder than gravity alone would make it. The fringes are too soft, as if the lens itself is fuzzy. Another model proposes dust sheets, thin layers passing between us and the star. Picture a cloud made of very small grains spread over a great distance, like powder thrown into a river of light. Dust dims more strongly at blue than red, leaving a color fingerprint. But the spectrograph does not show that tell. The dimming is even, a faithful drop across the spectrum, as if no grain chose a favorite color. If it is dust that behaves like no dust seen before. One more idea. Echoes from a tiny group of galaxies far behind the star, their light forming delicate interference patterns when the path is disturbed. The math can spit out fringes light and dark bands that shimmer along the edges of a shadow. Yet the energy is too small, the alignment too precise, the luck too large. The sky does offer coincidences, but this coincidence would be a coin landing on its edge 3 times in a row. Not impossible, but it feels like a story reaching too hard. They test each model with care. The computer draws curves, rise, dip, rise over and over. Each one tries to lie down on the observed line, but never quite fits. The residuals, those honest little differences between prediction and truth, wave like grass in a breeze. They do not vanish. They remind everyone that the star is telling a story the models do not yet know how to read. Outside, the dome breathes. The telescope tracks. Somewhere in the field, a nebula glows faintly, and beyond it, exoplanets pull their suns in small, regular beats. Those worlds reveal themselves by clean dips, senior signatures that students learn in their first year. But this new dimming is not the stomp of a planet. The timing repeats, yet no orbiting body is seen. The light softens, but no color shifts. The edges shimmer, but no source resolves. It is an event that feels both solid and fragile, like a footprint in snow that refuses to melt. The team thinks about what moves. The summary of their nights grows into a list pinned above the desk. Orbit, comet, trajectory, telescope, starlight, spectrograph. They draw arrows between words like stitches, linking one idea to the next. They remember that color is not the only message. Time is also a message. Motion writes its own sentence in the way light rises and falls. Perhaps the answer hides there, in the cadence, in the drift, in the curve itself. An old notebook holds wisdom from past hunts. Years ago, a different anomaly was solved by seeing how long a shadow took to cross, not what color it took with it. A slow crossing means a wide screen or far-off hand. A quick one means something small or close. In this case, the crossing is unhurried, the edges feathered, the dip shallow yet persistent. It suggests not a single object, but a field like fog moving through a valley, touching everything a little, leaving little hard outline behind. They imagine a sheet of particles, so fine they act like waves of light themselves, bending gently, creating faint interference at the edges of the dimming. The pattern would repeat if the sheet is part of a larger stream, a river of dust or ice broken into lanes. But that would still leave color marks, unless the grains are all much larger than a wavelength, unless they are all much smaller, unless the sheet is not dust at all, but something that neither scatters nor glows. Another thought comes like a hush. What if the starlight is not only passing through matter, but also through motion fields that change with time, invisible hands that nudge a wave a fraction early or late? In such a case, color would remain constant, while timing would be king. The shimmer at the edges would be a phase, not a pigment. The narrator's voice settles, slow and even. He speaks of patience, of the long game of careful watching. He reminds the listener that every great chart began as a new squiggle nobody liked. That once, long ago, people saw the first exoplanet as a wobble in a line and argued over whether the wobble was real. That many natural wonders arrive not with fireworks, but like a soft tap on the shoulder. The instruments answer that call. Observers schedule more nights in winter and spring under different air, with different mirrors. They choose stars nearby in the same patch of sky to split what belongs to the star from what belongs to the space between. They slow the cadence of their measurements to catch the tender fringes, then speed it up to watch the dip center breathe. Every cadence is a net. Every exposure is a thread in a wider weave. In the control room, the glow is blue and the coffee is warm. A student hands around a printout of the brightness curve. It looks almost like the previous week's curve, almost like the week before, the same quiet architecture, the same long porch of dimming with its feathered railings. The professor traces the line with a finger and says softly, "If this is a messenger, it is patient. If this is a harbinger, it is kind." The data move from machines to minds. Ideas drift across the table like small boats. Someone suggests that perhaps a slow field of tiny objects, fragments from an ancient traveler, crosses the sightline, cooled to silence, neither gas nor glow. Another suggests a subtle lens made not by gravity alone, but by structure waves in a medium we do not yet map. Another simply writes the word motion and circles it 3 times. Headlines do not come. This is not a flash. It is a candle, and the night is large. Yet the team feels awe in the steady, fragile thing they are allowed to hold, the signature of something hidden, written in starlight. They practice humility. They practice care. They practice listening to what does not shout. Outside, the sky deepens. The telescope sighs as it swivels, and the star of interest twinkles with a human-scale flicker that means nothing to the detector, but everything to the eye. You, listening now, might picture that star as a white seed resting in a black field. Around it flows the gentle veil, the drifting shadow, the cosmic whisper that asks for time. In the coming analyses, they will search the curve for clues to how fast the unseen thing moves, and in what direction, and with what grace. They will try to learn whether the soft edges are born from interference, or from layers, or from a path that is not straight at all. They will compare night to night, and watch for tiny shifts that reveal a hidden orbit or a wide, slow river. They will learn to read the pauses between photons as carefully as they read the photons themselves. For now, The chapter closes on the quiet act of attention. Light has traveled for ages to reach a mirror, and the mirror has offered it to a sensor, and the sensor has handed it to a human hand. No new color speaks. No picture of a visitor appears on the screen. Yet the patient dimming repeats, and its edges shimmer, and somewhere in that rhythm a message waits. The monitors fade to a dim glow. The room sits in the cradle of silence. Outside, cold air carries the scent of dust and night. The star continues to shine, and the instruments continue to count. The mystery rests, not solved, not ignored like a soft note held at the end of a song. And in that held note, in that lingering breath of starlight, there is the sense of motion still to be traced, a secret curve not yet drawn, and the feeling that the sky, in its timeless way, is leaning closer to share it. Orbital maps unfurl across a quiet screen. Concentric paths bloom like ripples on a still lake, asteroid families looping in patient rings. Comets lean long and thin toward the sun. Jupiter's pull steady as a tide. In the soft glow of the control room, every orbit hums with simple rules. Yet one track refuses to belong. It slides between the lanes, not a circle, not an ellipse, not the scattered dart of a broken rock. It is an anomaly, a drifting shadow that seems to choose. The team watched for nights that stretched into weeks. They compared it against the catalog of known travelers, slow caravans of Trojans near Jupiter, the cold stones past Neptune, the dust streams that fall like gentle veils through starlight. Each comparison fell away. The trajectory moved as if it listened for music nobody else could hear. Perihelion, the closest brush to the sun, kept perfect time with gaps in the great planet's rhythms, slipping past resonances like a patient dancer stepping between beats. It was not pushed like other bodies. It glided. They asked the telescopes for more. Wide dishes in the desert. Frosted mirrors on a mountain. A patient spectrograph splitting starlight into thin rainbows. The anomaly offered little in return. No clear signature of ice, no dust tail, no halo of gas. It reflected sunlight with the mild flicker of something flat, then changed its sheen as if turning a face. At times, it looked like a swarm, a cluster of specks made large by distance. At other times, it looked like a sheet, a sail, a moving lens bending the light behind it. Every new frame gave a new answer, and each answer faded as soon as it was found. So they turned to the fortress of math. Equations marched like rows of trees, a forest where every branch carried a rule. Gravity here, resonance there, small perturbations from the dodging dance of minor planets. They added pressure from sunlight, a gentle push even a feather could feel. They tested how heat might lift a grain from a rock to make it stream. The computers hummed, the simulations multiplied, and the results arrived in careful stacks. Some matched for a moment, then wandered. Others failed from the start. It was like fitting a key into a door that almost turned but never clicked. They tried to swarm again. Could a cloud of tiny pebbles drift together, held by the weak embrace of shared motion? The swarm collapsed in the model, or it spread and vanished. They tried a sheet, a wide fragment, thin as leaf skin, catching photons like wind. The sheet spun too fast, or too slow, or broke. They tried a moving lens, a shimmer of dust arranged in a curve, bending light so that what they saw was not where it truly was. The lens explained the brightness change, then lost the path. Every explanation carried promise, then spoke the quiet word, almost. In the hush after one long run, the lead dynamicist rested a hand on the desk and said, not to the room but to the image, if not mass as we expect, could it be geometry? Could the shape of the path be wrong, not because of the traveler, but because the room, the space it moves through tilts in a way we haven't seen? It sounded like a dream, a hope reaching past easy answers. Yet the math did not laugh. There are small places where space can bend just a little more than we think. Not the thunder of a black hole, not the roar of a galaxy, but a local crease, a hidden fold, a river's eddy in the grand flow. They brought in maps of the solar wind. They traced the magnetic field lines that radiate from the sun like fine threads, curling with rotation, flexing with storms. They looked at the places where the wind thickens, where its speed jumps, where particles drift and gather as if listening to an old song. They compared these living patterns to the Anomalies passage. A rider might choose such roads. A fragment might surf these streams and pick a line between resonances. A silent messenger riding a highway made not of rock and gravity, but of the sun's breath. The voice in the narration stayed calm, almost soothing. It promised patience. It reminded everyone watching that wonder grows on the edge of what is known. In the dim light, charts slid by like clouds. There were sketches of orbits near Jupiter's islands, where resonance holds families of bodies in secure cradles. There were plots of small pushes adding up over time. There were soft images of comets, their tails like pale smoke, and starfields like a quilt of quiet fire. The anomaly drifted through them all, a soft line in a sea of lines, always between, never bound. Past discoveries spoke in the background. The slow realization that Neptune existed because of a wobble in Uranus. The way Einstein's geometry corrected Mercury's small, stubborn precession. The careful noticing of exoplanets by the tiniest dimming of a distant star. The lesson was simple and humbling. When a path looks wrong, sometimes the measure is right and the map is wrong. Sometimes the space itself asks to be drawn a little differently. Still, they were careful. Geometry is a big word. It can mean many things. A tilt of space can come from mass, but also from flows of plasma, from hidden fields, from structures too thin to see. The team avoided claims and reached for tests. The next step would not be a proclamation. It would be a measurement. The plan grew like a sketch on the back of a notebook. If geometry is at play, the anomaly's path should lean in step with the shape of the solar wind. The wind carries charged particles outward, the sun's long breath. Its shape changes with the sun's mood, in cycles, in bursts, in quiet hours when the heliosphere sleeps. If the traveler rides that breath, timing perihelion would not be random. It would be a graceful choice of calm corridors between storms, the way a sailor reads the ocean and chooses a lane between waves. To test this, they would stand where the wind is felt most, the inner rooms of the system, where heat sings and light is sharp, yet shadows drift cool across cratered night. They would combine the old orbital maps with live wind data, and they would listen. It was not the kind of listening ears can do. It was a listening of numbers, the soft alignment of patterns, the hush of two curves laying on top of each other and whispering, "Yes, I fit." At night, when the room was empty, the anomaly's track glowed on its own. It was easy to imagine it as an ancient traveler with a memory longer than ours, passing between the thick ropes of Jupiter's pull and the steady tug of the other giants, never caught, never lost. It cut through the calm like a slow comet that forgot its tail, like a messenger who refuses the common road. It left no dust anyone could find. It carried no signature but motion. For those watching from their beds, the narrative settled into sleep-light words. Picture the solar system as a quiet clock. The hands move with care. The tick is gravity. The talk is time. Then, imagine a soft pencil tracing a path between the hands, so close the gears should bite, but they do not. The pencil knows when the teeth will meet and slides between them like a note slipped under a door. That is how the anomaly feels, a light foot on the edge of moving parts, a dancer in a room full of spinning wheels. The telescopes nodded again, and again the spectrograph split the glow. Starlight fell into lines, each line a clue. If the object were a sheet, thin and bright, the lines might rock with its turns. If it were a swarm, The lines might blur with shifts, fine grains catching and missing light together. If it were a moving lens, the background would twist. They found hints, but no confession. The lines offered partial truths, like a friend holding back the last detail to keep a promise. People sometimes expect science to be loud with answers. Often it is quiet. In the quiet, patience becomes a tool. The team refused to push the story into a shape it did not own. They leaned into the calm and waited for the sun to speak in plasma and light. A new run of measurements would begin when the wind changed. The sun, like a heart, has a pulse. When it slows, edges smooth. When it quickens, edges bite. The anomaly, if it listens to that pulse, will tell on itself. There is comfort in the idea that geometry, not mass, might guide a path. Geometry feels like the promise of order, a hidden pattern drawn into the room. But geometry can also be fragile. A veil can tear. A fold can smooth away. The future tense here is soft. If the space bends where we cannot see, new instruments must be built. New ways of mapping must be learned. And if the bending is not real, if the traveler is only Cleverstone, then the learning still stands. Either way, curiosity wins. In the final minutes of this calm vigil, the screen dims to a gray-blue hush. Jupiter's broad wake fades into a soft curve. The asteroid families settle into their loops like birds finding perches at dusk. The anomaly remains a fine thread drifting between them, a quiet refusal to choose the easy lane. Testing will ask the sun for a sign, for the feel of wind across a face we cannot touch. And somewhere just inside the edge of that glow, the breath of the sun gathers and waits, a gentle current moving through a vast room, as if inviting a small traveler and all who watch to lean closer, because in the drifting quiet one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. The night between worlds is not empty. It has texture, like the finest silk moving over glass. In that soft darkness, the sun exhales. The solar wind, a quiet river of charged particles, flows outward from the glowing heart, past planets and moons, past old wanderers and young machines, through the belt and arch of rock and ice, ancient travelers circling in long patience. The wind drifts and gathers what it finds. Dust rises, dust falls. Tiny grains, older than history, begin to glow in the sun's quiet breath. They are small, no larger than the speck that dances in a beam of starlight by your window. Yet they carry stories. Each grain keeps the memory of a collision that shattered a stone, the brush of a comet that shrugged off its frost, the slow erosion of time. When the wind meets them, it does not roar. It persuades. Grains lift and slide, until they stream like pale threads along invisible lines, curving with orbit, folding around mass, turning every path into a gentle ribbon. Plasma waves ripple in this river. They rise and fall without sound, the way a breeze moves through tall grass. You cannot see the waves, but the machines can. Their instruments hear the river's song. Magnetometers whisper, tuned to the slightest twist of a field. Spectrographs stare, hungry for the faint colors of ions, for fingerprints in the darkness. Radar sends small pings across the void, counting echoes, waiting for a true reply. Each device is a patient listener, trained to separate a messenger from the chorus. The dust does not try to be seen, but the sun gives it a modest halo. A luminous haze forms around each grain as electrons leap and fall, as charges gather and disperse. The grains become little lanterns, each no brighter than a dream, and yet together they weave a soft glow. Sometimes a sensor catches this shimmer and mistakes it for something else, a signal, a visitor, the anomaly that stirs the human mind. It looks like a shape where no body stands, a drifting shadow that moves without a source. In a laboratory on Earth, people have studied dust for generations. They have levitated grains with fields, watched them arc and settle, measured how the smallest surfaces steal charge from light. They learned that dust can act like a sheet, a veil so thin that even a telescope may not notice it until it passes across a beam. Out here between stones and comets, a sheet could stretch for miles, curling at the edges like paper dipped in water. Charge makes it hold together for a while. The solar wind keeps spreading it out, like breath over the surface of a lake. So the question grows, could the anomaly be such a veil? A charged sheet loose from a collision. A strand pulled from a comet's old memory, left behind when the ice burned away and the nucleus moved on. A trail that lingers invisible until the sun's breath strokes it at just the right angle. The idea is not wild. Comets do this as they circle. Dust hangs in their wake. And when the wake crosses an orbit, the dust becomes a quiet meteor shower, drawing faint lines across the night like notes from a hidden instrument. The machines listen. The river flows. The belt, wide and secretive, turns. Across days that feel like a long, slow tide, the data gathers. Radar pings bounce back in numbers that change with no clear pattern. Sometimes the return is stronger, as if a thin wall had wandered across the beam. At other times, it is barely there, a ghost of a ghost. The magnetometers show gentle swells, tiny bends as if an unseen brush tugged at the field. The spectrograph waits for ion fingerprints, sodium, oxygen, carbon, expecting at least a hint of a comet's breath. It records lines, but none with the shape of a clear confession. The haze is there and not there. It is clue and confusion at the same time. In such work, the mind must soften. Rushing will not help. The river moves at its own speed. The belt follows its own geometry, and the dust knows only what the wind teaches it. The team remembers past false leads. There was a time when a speck on a sensor looked like an exoplanet transit, a small dip in starlight that stirred hope. It was dust on the detector window, nothing more. Another time, a rhythmic flare made. Everyone think of an engine, something purposeful in the dark. It was the beat of a rotating antenna catching a reflection. The night is full of these lessons. From that calm, a plan forms. If a sheet of charged dust wanders through, it should bend plasma waves around it, like water curving around a sandbar, leaving a pattern the instruments can recognize. The magnetometers will be mapped to the second. The radar will sweep with varied angles, like a lighthouse turning its beam through fog. The spectrograph will watch a narrow space where the field suggests the veil may be densest. Each instrument will ask a simple question in its own language, and together, their voices may outline a shape. For long hours, the spacecraft observes. The current of the solar wind rises, near and far oscillations passing underneath. There is no dramatic flash, no photograph that answers everything. Instead, there is a soft stitch in the noise, a rhythm that seems to repeat, though not perfectly. At the same time, a slight depression in the radar returns strolls across the log, then reverses, as if the beam slid along a curved face. The magnetometer notes a delicate kink. The spectrograph stays quiet, the ions still mute. If this is a sheet, it is a clear one. If it is a comet's memory, it is old and faint. They trace the spacecraft's trajectory through the belt. The geometry suggests the craft may have brushed the edge of a structure, something thin and uneven, drifting with the solar wind. For a few hours, it stood across the path. Then it melted into the river again, drawn out until its contrast fell below hearing. The anomaly persists in the record, but it remains what it began as, a shadow without a body, a reply without a voice. The quiet is not defeat, it is instruction. In astronomy, silence is data. Absence of a color tells as much as a bright line. A lack of ions argues that the source is not a gas, not a fresh exhale from a comet's heart. The slow bend in the field speaks of shape, not mass, something that acts like a sail, not like a stone. The change in radar echoes hints at texture, perhaps a clustered veil of grains, not a smooth wall. Put together, the hints narrow the path forward. The team breathes with the pace of the night and writes it down. They think about other places where dust rules. Rings around giant planets, shepherded by moons, rated by gravity into bright bands. The zodiacal light that rises on Earth before dawn, a triangular glow along the ecliptic, made from sunlight scattered by dust. The tails of comets split into dust and plasma, one curving gently, one straight as an arrow along magnetic lines. These are not strangers. They are relatives of whatever crossed the path tonight. Each one says the same thing in a different accent. Dust is not just debris. It is a medium. It carries whispers across space. The thought brings comfort. If the anomaly lives inside this medium, then it can be heard. Dust may glow only a little, but its patterns are teachable. Plasma waves can be mapped like ripples on a pond. Even when a spectrograph finds no ions, the absence refines the search. The machines are good students. Somewhere inside the noise, order waits. Patterns hide in the repeat and the almost repeat, in the way a pulse drifts, in how a curve steepens and softens with time. Night after night, the logs fill like pages in a quiet book. The craft keeps watch as it arcs along its trajectory, keeping to the plane where the sun's breath is smoothest. Sometimes the wind slows and the dust settles back into place. Sometimes a flare from the star stiffens the river and lifts the grains, making the haze brighter for a while. Each change is a chance to compare, to test whether the drifting shadow appears when the river is fast, or slow, or only when the angle of light is just so. The work is slow. It is also kind. It gives the mind room to wonder without fear. What if a charged sheet is not alone? What if the belt holds many such veils, some stacked, some torn, some woven back together by fields we do not yet model well? What if the anomaly is not a single thing, but a behavior dust learning to move as one in the sun's breath? These questions are not traps. They are doors. They guide a new kind of listening. To hear a choir, you do not focus on one voice. You soften your ear and let the harmony reveal the shape of the room. In the end, the team closes the day with a small truth. The anomaly acts like a shadow, yet it leaves traces that matter. It bends a field. It dims a ping. It will not speak in ions, at least not here, not now. Even these limits are gifts. They cut away what cannot be, and in the space that remains, attention sharpens. The river keeps flowing. The belt keeps turning. The dust, that fragile archive of collisions and comets, keeps its luminous hush. Outside the window of the spacecraft, stars drift with the patience of centuries. A planet glows far off like a candle cupped in a hand. The instruments breathe and blink. Somewhere, not loud, not bright, something arranges itself. Perhaps it is only dust, learning the shape of the wind. Perhaps it is a pattern we have not named. The glow softens. The river quiets. And in that drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. The night is quiet, but the machines are awake. Dishes turn with slow grace. Domes split like eyelids. In orbit, small satellites drift and listen, their paths a lace of cold light. Down on Earth, arrays fan out across deserts and mountaintops, the wind brushing cables like strings of a sleeping harp. Signals rise and fall starlight thinned by distance, thickened by time, and a calm chorus of numbers begins. They share what they hear, ground to sky, sky to ground. Fiber lines carry the faintest whispers across oceans. One dataset meets another like rivers meeting at a delta. A networked mind forms not one brain, but many, each telescope, each spectrograph, each tiny cube in orbit, adding a syllable to the same long sentence. The data does not shout. It drifts. It arrives as soft glow, gentle veil, the slow beat of a distant heart. Inside that flow, a model waits. It learned on old comets and known transits, on the clipped dips of exoplanet shadows and the sharp cuts of asteroid occultations. It studied the way a star's light curve hums when something crosses its face. Millions of curves. Millions of tests. It knows the common shapes. The steep edge of a satellite flare. The thin line of a meteor trail. The jitter of an instrument catching its breath. It recognizes the usual kinds of night. But the machines were trained to look for something else too. Not a bright flash. Not a flare that shouts. A forbidden pattern, the summary called it. A shape that does not belong to cataloged bodies. A dip that returns like a faint echo across seasons, never the same day, never the same minute, yet somehow the same. It is as if a shadow moves on a path that sidesteps our neat maps. A path drawn in the margins where no asteroid is logged, where no scheduled satellite should be. The code hums. One pass, then 20. It shifts the data window, stretches it, compresses it, like a careful hand testing fabric. Each curve becomes a small landscape, rises like hills, valleys, in twilight. The model touches each hill, each valley, and asks a simple question. Does a hidden traveler pass here? Does a messenger go by, small and stubborn, with no name we recognize? When the answer is maybe, a flag appears. When the answer is yes, the flag holds. Yet flags are not proof. Cross-checks begin, patient and plain. Meteor databases are tapped. Showers, sporadics, the timing of old swarms that still send sparks. A match? The flag weakens. No match? It stays. Satellite catalogs are scanned. The bright trains and single birds we launched, their trajectories plotted with tidy numbers. A glint can fool a curve for a breath. But glints move fast, make sharp angles, and leave a signature. If that signature is present, the flag falls. Instruments have moods. They click and warm. They reset and drift. The machines remember this too. Calibration logs are opened. Weather records are read. Was a lens frosting? Did cloud pass like a thin veil? Was the spectrograph on a new setting? Each guess is tested against the same seconds where a dip was seen. Many anomalies die here, kindlies. They were never messengers, only hiccups, false echoes born from glass and air. What remains is small. It sits in the data like a grain of sand at the edge of a tide. Not bright, not loud. Soft and stubborn. It returns after months, slightly offset, as if the sky is singing around with itself. The curve bends in the same way, but not perfectly. Perfection would make it easy. Instead, it asks for attention. It asks for patience. It asks for humility. On a screen, the curve looks almost calm. Light drops, recovers, and carries on. The model gives a score, a number that means, pay attention here. Computers propose. Humans decide. That rule holds the room, even when the room is empty, and the only sound is the hum of cooling fans. A researcher leans closer, eyes following the dip as if it could speak. It does not speak, but it feels like a voice, distant and clear, like a memory you cannot place. To decide, they look sideways at time. Past seasons are pulled in. Winter fields of data lie beside summer fields. Months fold like pages. The echo appears again, sometimes stronger, sometimes thin. It does not drift like a comet. It does not keep the tight schedule of a known exoplanet transit. Its trajectory, if it has one, is masked by our ignorance. The star remains the same. The dip is the visitor. The machines say, it is consistent. The humans say, show us more. So the net widens. Observatories far apart agree to point. A satellite in orbit schedules a stare, budgeted minutes like gold. The Earth rotates, handing the sky from one station to the next. As the world turns, the signal stays in the frame. Each telescope adds a line to the same song. Summed together, those lines make a deeper tone. The small becomes a little less small. The soft becomes an edge you can trace with a steady finger. With more eyes, the cross-checks grow sharper. Aircraft paths are excluded. Even the glow of city domes at the horizon is mapped and subtracted. The instruments are coaxed into stillness. Everything that can be explained is explained and set aside. What resists stands out. It stands out, and yet it does not leap. It only persists, like a distant buoy blinking across dark water. The blink too regular to be chance, too gentle to be a flare. If the machines are right, the anomaly is real. This sentence changes the air. Real means it is not a math trick or an artifact of tired hardware. Real means an object crossed the line between our star and our lens. Real means a trajectory threaded through space that includes us. Earth is a participant, not a bystander. The mind drifts, as minds do, to scale. The dip is small. The messenger must be small. But small things can be close. And if it is real, it is close. Closeness is not comfort. It is tension. The knowledge that the space between watcher and watched might be measured in days of travel or hours of light. Closeness wakes old stories, the ones about harbingers and visitors and signs. Yet the people in the room breathe and keep their hands on the data. The calm remains. Wonder, yes. Awe, yes. But the math still rules the moment. What does closeness mean to those who keep watch through the endless night? It means checking the clock and the logs and the backup power. It means calling a colleague 2 time zones away and speaking low, so a sleeping family down the hall is not disturbed. It means drawing the next plan, another window, another run, more time on the sky. It means a walk to the roof when the data loads, to feel the air, to look at the same star with naked eyes, to remember that the models live inside a world that is large and real. The human senses return to the screen with new softness. They scrub through noise as if combing wind-tossed hair. They let suspicion do its job. Doubt is a tool here, not an insult. Doubt clears the way for truth by sweeping false trails. Like a caretaker of a garden at night, they trim distractions and water what remains. The curve holds. The echo remains a quiet drumbeat, present, patient, undecorated by drama. Around them, the language of science keeps order. Error bars, confidence intervals, baselines and controls. The spectrograph sings in straight lines. The telescope lists its temperature and focus in tidy rows. It is easy to love the poetry of starlight, but it is the spreadsheet that carries the day. It confirms where memory would embellish. It warns where hope runs fast. The team moves carefully, past and present in dialogue. Still, the mind wanders beyond numbers. It steps into the dark where the machines cannot go. In that dark, the anomaly is a small traveler, not a comet shedding dust, not a bright satellite with solar panels for wings. Something else. A pebble? A fragment? An unexplained hinge in the night? The questions are soft on purpose. They do not leap to the loudest answer. They let the unknown stay unknown for a little longer, like a story told around a low fire. When the data from orbit returns, it agrees in part and argues in part. Agreement strengthens the signal. Disagreement sharpens the plan. Over many nights, the pattern gains a body. The dip has a shape that repeats not exact but echo-rich. Seasons change. The echo returns. The machine notes the cadence. The humans give it a name that is not a claim, only a handle to hold. In their private notes, some call it the messenger. The messenger does not claim to be a harbinger of anything. It is only a shape in light, a recurring absence. The meaning, if it has any, is ours to make later. For now, the rule holds. Computers propose. Humans decide. Decision here is not a sudden act. It is a slow leaning, a careful nod. It is the moment a team says, "We will treat this as real, and we will test it as if it is wrong." That is how truth survives. Night after night, the arrays listen. They watch the ancient traveler stars, the swirls of nebula, the tight dances of exoplanet systems. Inside that grandeur, they save time for the small. A patch of sky, plain and old, becomes a daily stop, like a window you check before bed. The machines keep their vigil within human patience. The people bring warmth, the fragile hope that guides them through tired hours. If the anomaly is real and close, then one night soon, the curve will dip on schedule. The telescopes will already be waiting. The orbiting eye will be turned. The spectrograph will hold steady, its lines quiet and clean. The world will spin beneath this plan, and somewhere someone will be awake in a kitchen, or a lab, or a lonely control room, listening for the soft click that says, "It's happening." And if it does, the night will not change its color. The sky will not split or shout. A tiny fraction of starlight will step aside and return. A trace will slide into a dataset. Somewhere inside the networks, a model will smile in numbers. Somewhere else, a person will smile in the dim light and pour a fresh cup of tea. They will not know everything. They will only know that the hidden shape has kept its promise, and that promise feels like the first line of a letter. In time, they will ask what it is. In time, they will argue and refine and test again. But for now, the machines listen, and the people do not look away. The chapter closes in quiet, starlight steady, screens dim, the echo returning in its own season. The glow fades along the horizon of thought, but in the fading rests a simple, tender question, one that lingers in every watcher's mind. What exactly is crossing the light, and why does it feel so near? The building settles into quiet as midnight crosses the roof like a slow wave. Coffee cools in paper cups. Screens glow with a soft lunar light. Beyond the glass, the dome of the telescope turns with a careful hum, like a great animal breathing in the dark. Somewhere deep in that circle of mirrors, starlight gathers thin, fragile, and very old. Imagine looking up tonight, seeing a faint glow moving across the stars. He says to himself, not loud enough to break the room's spell. His voice is a thread. He leans closer to the monitor, where a trace line ticks its way forward. The trace is not much, a drifting shadow on a sea of noise. Yet it keeps returning. That is what pulls them back each night. In the next chair, a colleague wears headphones, listening not to music, but to the whisper of data. The feed lives as a stream of numbers turned into sound rising, falling, almost like breathing. She closes her eyes to clear the day from her mind. She listens for the anomaly, the small rise that should not be there, the cosmic whisper hiding under static. Her hand hovers over a spectrograph readout, where colors are not colors, but clues. Sodium lines. Hydrogen bomber marks. The simple bones of light laid bare. They speak softly, the way people do in a library or a chapel. They talk about meteors and memory. How a meteor writes itself across the atmosphere, a bright scratch that fades and leaves only a story. They talk about destiny and doubt, how science carries both. The sky can look like a promise. The sky can also refuse to explain itself. Outside, the air is cold and still. A thin band of cloud drifts like a gentle veil. The telescope keeps its orbit of motion slew, settle, collect, repeat. On the screen, a field of stars forms a quiet map. Each point is a sun with its own history, its own traffic of comets, its own slow dance of worlds. Each point is a clock, steady and patient. Time feels different under their gaze. It widens. The colleague removes the headphones and exhales. The room's hum returns. A fan, a relay click, the soft thrum of a cooler keeping the detector at peace. She looks at him and smiles the tired smile that says, "I think I heard it." He nods and says nothing. He marks the time. A line appears in the log. 1 hour 17 minutes and 23 seconds rise in flux. Amplitude small, repeating cadence suspected. They do not rush to a conclusion. They have learned not to. In the past, others did. In the early years of radio surveys, a strange pulse would shake the graphs, and hearts would race, and headlines would whisper about messengers and harbingers. Then the truth would arrive on sound feet, a misaligned cable, a kettle boiling in a staff kitchen, the sun's own weather coughing at the detector. He remembers those stories told by older hands, told with a little fondness and a little sting. Tonight, patience is their guide. Patience is a path, and they put one foot in front of the other. They test the instrument. They check the timing. Is the rise in phase with the telescope's rotation? Is it a reflection, a ghost in the optics? They look at calibration frames, blank fields, dark frames, bias maps. They let the math breathe. They let their own breath slow to match. You might be drifting now, feeling the edges of sleep tug at your thoughts. In that half-sleep, the room around them softens. The monitors become distant windows on a ship. The ship moves not through water, but through time. Past discoveries, they think of those too, arrive like warm memories told in low voices. How the first exoplanet around a sun-like star was found by its tug, a wobble in the parent star's motion. How tiny worlds betrayed their presence by casting a passing shadow across a sun. A transit, a world saying, "I am here," not by light, but by taking a little light away. The sky writes their names in starlight for a moment, then fades. It is not a poem in the literal sense. It is the way their eyes, dry and blinking, catch afterimages when they look away from the field, a pale scratch on the inside of vision that feels like a signature. They laugh quietly at the thought. They know the sky does not remember them, but they remember the sky. This is how memory works in science. Not one mind, but many, holding the same shape in their thoughts until it becomes a measure of truth. Fear and awe sit side by side in the room. Fear that the anomaly will vanish and show itself to be nothing at all. Awe that it returns again and again, as if on a careful trajectory. He considers the word unexplained and does not flinch. Unexplained is a beginning, not an end. On the whiteboard, a simple sketch blooms. A curve representing brightness over time. Dips at regular intervals. A longer dip on occasion, like a comet's tail brushing the data. He draws an orbit, a path, tilted just so, and writes the math that governs how a shadow travels. She adds labels, period, depth, duration. They talk about inclination, about how many chances the universe gives us to see a transit at all. Most orbits tilt out of view. Most worlds circle their suns in private. The ones that line up with our sight are rare. Their rarity makes them precious. He returns to the console and marks another pass. The anomaly arrives on schedule, small and steady. It is not a comet. It is not a satellite. The trajectory rules those out. A satellite's path would cut in a different way, sharp and brief. A comet would paint its own changing light, dust and ice blooming near the sun, then fading out. This is something that comes and goes like a drifting shadow, the kind left by a world or by a ring of debris or by an ancient traveler with a long, dark body. He does not say the word alien. She does not either. They talk instead about natural frames, occultations, eclipses, rotations, rings, dust. Dust can play tricks. Dust is a good liar. But dust also leaves fingerprints in the spectrograph. It reddens the light. It changes the shape of the dip. They check for that. Let the instrument tell them. The spectrograph is patient. It will give them an answer, but only after a long listening. Time moves. The clock hands are small moons. She yawns and warms her fingers on a cup. In the hallway, a vending machine hums like a distant nebula. They are not alone in the world. Other watchers sit in other rooms, under other domes, listening to the same sky. Emails and logs travel like quiet letters between them, carrying hope and caution. The language in those messages is careful and kind. We see a faint periodicity. We cannot rule out instrumental origin. We recommend continued monitoring. That last line is the one that matters. Continue. Watch. Record. You may feel the same wish they carry. To go outside and tip your head back and find the faint glow yourself. He almost does. The roof ladder calls. But he knows the glow is not for the naked eye tonight. It is too small, too thin, like thread in a dark room. The telescope must be their eye. The data must be their night vision. He thinks of older nights, of long ago astronomers freezing ink in cold domes, of plates of glass holding the dust of comets and the scratch of stars. He thinks of the first time a star's light was split into a spectrum, a rainbow given a ruler. Past observers turned unknowns into numbers. They tamed wonder without killing it. He and his colleague are part of that same line. In the future, he knows, others will pass the same waypoint and smile at their small notes in the margins. The anomaly returns once more before dawn. Not stronger, not weaker, simply there, like a slow footstep. The cadence suggests a path around something. If patience is a path, where does it lead? It leads, he believes, toward techniques born from exoplanet work. A tiny world seen by its shadow. An exoplanet blocks a sliver of starlight. The star dims, then brightens. The pattern reveals the orbit, the size, sometimes even the whisper of an atmosphere. That craft built over decades of quiet watching now becomes their best lamp. They will turn it toward this hidden visitor, whatever it is, and see if the same logic holds. Sleep moves through the room like a tide. The documentary voice inside your head slows, counting breaths with the machines. The data recorder clicks. The log grows by a line that reads simply, "Signal persists." Before they shut the dome for dawn, they step outside. The eastern horizon holds a pale seam. The stars do not vanish. They dim behind the morning. He looks up and tries, just once, to imagine the glow moving across the stars, a drifting messenger on a careful track. He imagines you looking up with him, wherever you are, and feeling how the sky puts a hand on your shoulder and says nothing at all. The air smells like metal and frost. The telescope powers down with a kind of dignity. Inside, they tag the files and back up the night's work. The last act of trust is to save. The second to last is to plan. They schedule more time, more ears, more eyes. They will test their orbit models. They will fold the signal on itself and see if it sings in harmony. Perhaps they will point another telescope, one with a wider mirror or a sharper spectrograph, to catch a clearer whisper. Perhaps they will ask for help from a network that never sleeps. They leave the room as the first birds try a few notes. The hallway lights blink from night mode to day. For a moment, the building feels like a ship returning to port. Everyone moves a little softer, as if they carried a sleeping child. And yet, something stays awake. Not them, exactly. Not the computers either. It is the question they have made with their watching. It floats above the dark monitor like heat. It follows them out into the morning, light as breath, waiting. In the thinning hush, the glow that once seemed certain fades into the brightening air. But in its fading, it leaves a trace quiet, perfectly timed. an unanswered line in a patient sky. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The night begins with a soft glow, a screen of stars like frost on glass. In that calm, a single point of light wavers. Not a flare, not a storm, just the faintest sigh, the kind of dip a firefly would make if it flew between you and the moon. This is the world of exoplanet hunters, where patience turns small shadows into stories. They learn to read starlight the way sailors read tides. Every star is a lighthouse, every flicker a signal. Kepler stared for years, unblinking, holding its gaze on crowded fields until patterns emerged. When a planet passed in front of a star, the star dimmed by a breath less than 1%, sometimes a few parts in 10,000, and then brightened again. TESS followed, scanning wide swaths of sky, listening for a rhythm in the quiet. From these small falls and rises, astronomers drew orbits, measured sizes, guessed at skies we could not see. Light curves became maps. Timing became truth. From those distant lessons came something else, the art of the baseline. Before a dip can mean anything, the line must be steady. Instruments are tuned. Temperature changes are tracked. The heartbeat of the telescope is subtracted from the heartbeat of the star. Only then does a clean signal appear. The cadence matters too, the spacing of each observation, the drumbeat that makes a melody from noise. And so does timing, precise down to fractions of a second. Because a late shadow or an early one can change the shape of a world. Now that same craft points closer to home. Not to a distant sun, but to the space between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt drifts like a broken necklace around our star. Here, rocks the size of mountains wander along slow trajectories. Some are bright, some dark, many turn like old clocks. When they pass in front of background stars, the starlight can blink a small, sharp transit called an occultation. It is the same language, light, shadow, time, but the new signal is different. It acts like a transit without a planet, a traveler with no body to anchor it. The dip is gentle, the edge is soft, as if a veil crossed the star instead of a stone. It repeats, but not with the certainty of a clock. The effect is both there and not there, a whispered pattern that refuses to stand still. It comes from our own sky, from within the familiar family of the solar system, and yet it feels foreign. Teams build models borrowing tools from exoplanet work. They simulate a small rock, then a larger one. They tilt imagined orbits, stretch the path across the star, spin the body to mimic tumbling. They try dust tails like a comet and rings like a tiny Saturn. They run the fits, check the residuals, and watch the math betray them. The curves do not match. The clean edges of a planet's silhouette are missing. The expected timing drifts. The brightness falls and recovers as if the light has been bent, not blocked. Failure is a teacher. With every model that does not hold, the shape of the anomaly sharpens. It is not a solid rock. It is not a neat ring system. It is not a cloud that fades in the way comet tails fade. The mismatch sketches negative space, like carving a sculpture by removing everything it cannot be. The error bars tighten. The map in the dark gains contours. To trust that map, the baseline must be perfect. Observers return to first principles. They watch comparison stars to catch the telescope's moves. They account for humidity and thin clouds, the sway of air currents high above. They correct for tiny color shifts as starlight passes our atmosphere. They test cadence, fast bursts to catch sharp edges, long stretches to watch slow drifts. They cross-check the timing with clocks beating from space, because a fraction of a second lost on Earth can introduce a phantom shadow in the heavens. You can imagine it, a network of quiet domes across the night side of Earth, each one holding its breath as a star dims by less than the blink of a firefly. In control rooms, a line marches across screens. Every point is a decision: keep, discard, question. The story and the noise emerges as a low hill where there should be a cliff, a dip with rounded shoulders, as if the starlight has flowed around something rather than struck it head-on. In the lab, spectrographs whisper their own clues. If dust were there, the color of the dip might change, the way sunset reddens through haze. If rock blocked the light, the star would dim the same across colors. But what if the colors hold steady, yet the timing leans? What if the light curve is not just a fall and rise, but a subtle asymmetric smear, like a finger dragged across wet paint? That smear is a hint that something is bending light, not simply blocking it. These are lessons earned by staring at far suns. Kepler taught humility. Most dips are nothing, a restless detector, a star with spots, an artifact left behind by the instrument's own breath. TESS taught scale watch enough stars, and rare things become visible. Together they showed that patience, not power, often reveals the most. In that spirit, the asteroid belt becomes a quiet stage, and a faint, unclaimed shadow steps into the light. Astronomers trace trajectories backward and forward. If a known asteroid is the actor, its path should line up with the dips. Many do. They pass and leave sharp, brief signatures. But this gentle shadow drifts slightly off the expected lines, like a traveler walking beside the road instead of on it. The archives are searched. Old data is reprocessed with new filters. The dip returns in places no one thought to look, steady enough to be real, slippery enough to confuse. What bends light in a place filled mostly with rock and dust? A swarm too fine to see directly could make a soft curtain, but the pattern is oddly consistent. A trail left by a disrupted body could smear starlight, but the timing fights that idea. A thin gas, invisible against the night, could refract the light like glass, but where would such gas come from, and why would it hold together? The more the models fail, the more the mind drifts to gravity, that quiet sculptor of motion. Gravity does not need to glow. It does not need to be seen. It shapes paths and paints arcs we cannot touch. A compact, hidden mass could bend the path of starlight without ever showing a silhouette. Not a planet in transit, not a rock in the way, but a gentle lens, a place where space itself curves just enough to redirect the beam. The dip becomes a soft cradle, a bright edge delayed by a stretch in the road that light must travel. Caution hangs in the room. Gravity is powerful, but so is the urge to explain too much with too little. The team moves slowly, measuring again, stacking nights of data until chance melts away. They test whether the star itself flickers from within. They compare similar stars nearby to rule out atmospheric tricks. They let the cadence breathe, slower sequences to watch the approach, faster bursts to catch the turning point. With each pass, the curve keeps its shy shape. The story of exoplanets helps here in a deeper way. It trained the eye to accept that absence can be evidence. When a planet blocks a star, we learn its size without seeing it. When a transit arrives early or late, we sense other worlds tugging on it, the unseen revealed by timing alone. That same habit of mind now looks at the asteroid belt, searching for presence in what is missing, for structure in a delay, for mass in a smear. You, listening in the dark, might feel the quiet wonder of it. The same instruments that found oceans of planets around other suns are being asked to read a softer script in our own sky. The same patience that mapped distant orbits is being used to trace a bend no eye can catch. The distance shrinks, but the mystery holds. Close to home does not mean simple. Familiar space can still carry an unexplained whisper. In the months ahead, more telescopes join. Some watch from desert plateaus where air stands still. Others sit above the air entirely, letting starlight arrive unbent by weather. Observers coordinate when one hemisphere turns to day, another takes up the vigil. The cadence becomes a global heartbeat. Data flows like a river. Each curve is a brushstroke added to a growing portrait of an anomaly that refuses to be a rock. The lesson from distant worlds is not only technical. It is emotional too, a blend of awe and discipline, a willingness to be wrong until the shape of truth appears. Models fail, and through their failure, the boundaries close in. The unexplained becomes smaller, sharper, more real. A dream meets method, and neither breaks. They lean into each other, forming a gentle tension that keeps the work alive. Night after night, the soft dip repeats. Always a little off, always a little right. The baseline holds. The timing refines. The curve keeps its rounded shoulders, its delicate tail. And with every careful check, the suspicion grows that this is not the shadow of a body at all, but the echo of a path made longer by the way space itself is arranged. If that is true, then gravity is already at work, quiet and patient, drawing with lines we cannot see. It bends not only the planets and comets, but the very road that light takes to reach us. In that bending lies a message, a hidden geometry written across the familiar sky. The stars do not shout it. They whisper it in softened dips and drifting shadows, in delays that feel like a held breath. The glow over the horizon fades. Screens dim. The telescopes keep their watch. Somewhere in the belt, an ancient traveler moves, or perhaps nothing moves at all, only space curving like a gentle nail. The instruments listen, and the silence deepens, yet hidden in that silence is something waiting to be understood. The night is quiet, and yet a star wavers. Not by its own will. Not from a storm on its surface. Something passes in front of it, small, unseen, and the starlight bends, then brightens, then falls back to normal. It is not a flash. It is a gentle swell, smooth as ink drawn in one calm stroke. Astronomers call it microlensing, gravity acting like a lens, curving light around a mass the way a river curves around a stone. Out there, where orbits are long and comets drift for ages, even a tiny traveler can briefly sharpen the glow of a distant sun. Observers have learned this language. A black hole would shout in the light curve. A planet's mass would whisper. When a lens crosses the line of sight, the star brightens in a quiet arc, first rising, then peaking, then fading. The curve is often symmetric in time, like a bell rung once. The timing and height reveal the lens's mass and speed. Telescopes on mountain ridges and in orbit wait for these soft signals, scanning fields rich with stars. The data comes down in steady streams, numbers that trace wonder onto the page. But sometimes the whisper is different. It does not match the simple weight of a lone mass. The anomaly that concerns them now is calm in the wrong way. It is too smooth, too centered, too at ease. The peak does not sharpen where it should. The edges do not show the tiny bumps they expect from a planet trailing debris or from a pair of objects moving together. The timing is almost perfectly poised, like a breath held by the sky. It feels natural and unnatural at once, an unexplained harmony inside a known song. Teams compare notes. They check the telescope, the sensor, the spectrograph. Did a cloud pass over? Did a mirror cooldown change the focus? They replay the night in their logs. The instruments were steady. Seeing conditions were good. The same curve appears in two scopes wide apart. That rules out many local mistakes. So the curve itself, the pattern written by gravity, stands on its own, a soft omen that invites care. Some voices suggest familiar culprits with unfamiliar histories, primordial remnants, born in the early universe before stars had settled into galaxies. If tiny black holes formed back then, their gravity could wander the present-day sky like ancient travelers. Yet a black hole lens usually has a telltale shape and timing. This one does not shout. If it is a remnant, it is a very quiet one, wrapped in shadows that do not disturb the light in the usual way. Others imagine a stranger bridge, a throat of space that offers a shortcut, a wormhole behaving as a movable lens. In theory, space-time may admit such bridges under strict rules. They cannot be ordinary passages. Nature resists shortcuts without cost. Equations demand stability, and stability demands exotic conditions, negative energy density, or something acting like it. If such a throat drifts across a star, it could bend light from angles that a simple mass cannot. Its lensing might be smooth to the point of eerie calm. It might be achromatic, no changing color, yet carry time delays that curve with unusual grace. The careful voice in the group repeats what must be repeated. Theory allows bridges, but nature sets strict rules. The rules are not gentle. Most wormholes, if they exist at all, would collapse without strange support. And even if one were momentarily open, its signature would need to be measured with care. Multiple images, fine timing, maybe tiny shifts in the way starlight arrives. The sky does not owe us clarity. It offers hints. It tests patience. Still, the pattern holds. Night after night, the curve sits there like a hidden brush stroke across the star's light. It is not proof of a throat in the dark. It is not proof of anything beyond gravity doing what it does. But it is unusual. And in astronomy, unusual is the seed of change. The mind leans toward wonder, and then pulls back, and then leans again. In that motion, curiosity and caution science breathes. They widen the net. Archival surveys are combed for similar whispers. The catalogs contain millions of light curves, each a living history of a star's brightness. Software trained on common microlensing events begins to flag outliers. Arcs that seem too smooth, peaks that last just a touch too long, symmetries that feel like careful handwriting. Some flagged events fall to normal causes, binary stars, slow drifts in the sensor. Others remain, as quiet and stubborn as the first. What does one do with a whisper that refuses to be anything else? One goes back to basics. Light bends around mass, forming a ring at perfect alignment. Most of the time, alignment is imperfect, and we see a rise instead of a ring. The shape depends on the lens's mass, its trajectory, and the distances involved. It also depends, in subtle ways, on structure, whether the lens is a single object or a cluster, whether it moves in a clean path or bears tides and companions. For a wormhole-like lens, if such a thing can exist within the rules, the path of light might bend through a geometry not centered on mass alone. The equations would draw the same curve on the outside, a swell and a fall, but with edges sanded too clean. Astronomers build a picture in the mind. Imagine the night like a sheet of glass. On one side, the star burns. On the other side, you. Between, the glass is not perfectly flat. It has a tiny dimple, a lens. If the dimple is carved by ordinary mass, a test beam of light, say, from a laser would bend by an amount that reveals the dimple's depth. If the dimple is carved by a throat of space, the beam might take a longer path that still appears short from your point of view, arriving with a time pattern you can only see with perfect clocks. To tell one from the other, you need more than brightness. You need timing from two vantage points. You need parallax not just in space, but in time. So minds turn toward instruments that can listen for such quiet timing. Earth-based telescopes can watch brightness, but the timing differences are too small. The planet moves, but not fast enough, not far enough, to split a subtle delay cleanly. A messenger craft could help an observer sent into a wide orbit, a patient machine drifting far from Earth, holding position like a second eye across the solar system. With a long baseline, the same event looks slightly different. The peak shifts by minutes or hours, depending on geometry. If gravity's whisper carries an unusual time signature, Two separated listeners may hear it differently. What would the messenger need? A stable clock, steady and sure. Laser links to Earth for synchronization. A small telescope with a wide field to catch candidate stars. A fast spectrograph to confirm that color stays constant, since true microlensing is achromatic. An onboard system to flag rises as they begin, then stare without blinking through the peak. It would sit beyond Earth, perhaps trailing along our orbit like an attentive companion, or looping high above the ecliptic where the solar glare fades. It would be simple in spirit and exacting in practice, built to measure patience. There is poetry in such a craft, a patient ear cupped to the dark. It would not chase the lens. It would not dive into a throat, if there is a throat. It would observe trajectories and record their quiet signatures. Data from Earth and data from the messenger would merge, drawing a delicate map of arrival times. From that map, one could test whether the curve is the work of a single mass, a pair, a cluster, or something with a geometry that sits just outside the familiar. On the ground, the work continues with catalogs and careful modeling. Teams fit the light curve with many possible lenses. Asteroid mass objects in deep orbit, wandering planets stripped from their stars, compact remnants with faint companions. Each fit is like trying on a lantern silhouette. Some nearly match. None match with the same untroubled smoothness. The tremors that usually ride along the edges, little oscillations from motion or substructure, are missing. If they are present, they hide below the noise like fish under a gentle veil. Skeptics keep the process honest. They remind everyone that nature loves to mimic. A quiet wind can smooth waves that look like glass. A chance alignment can turn a messy system into a clean signature once in a great while. The duty of science is not to fall in love with the first beautiful explanation. It is to ask the same question from many angles and accept the least magical answer that still explains the glow. That is not cynicism. It is care. And yet care does not erase awe. In the cradle of silence between stars, gravity writes. It sketches with curves and delays and faint twins of light. Most of the time, the sketch tells of ordinary mass on ordinary paths. Sometimes, rarely, it hints at structures that are allowed by equations but resisted by reality. Bridges, throats, movable lenses that might fold distance like cloth. If they are there, they are shy. If they are not, gravity can still pretend, for a moment, and draw lines that make us wonder. The star returns to normal. The drift of the night resumes. The telescopes cool, their domes turning like slow planets. On screens, the curve remains, a soft hill rising and falling, a memory of a visitor that did not stay. It is not a shout, only a whisper, but not a simple whisper either. It asks for better ears, for a wider vantage, for clocks that can hear light arrive with the precision of a heartbeat. Somewhere in the plans and sketches, a path forms for the messenger craft, a patient observer moving along a clean trajectory, its instruments ready to listen. It will not force the sky to answer. It will wait, and wait well. For now, there is only the curve, the hope, and the careful rules of nature. The glow fades back into the ordinary, but in its fading, it carries a question, a quiet harbinger, that lingers in the mind of anyone who has ever watched a star flicker and felt that something hidden had just brushed past. The screen opens on a soft glow, a slow drift across a starfield, as if the camera floats on a quiet tide. In the dark, a question breathes. If there are ports between stars, what holds their doors in place? The narrator speaks in a low, even tone. A wormhole, she says, is not just a hole. It is an opening with a frame. Frames need strength. They need rules. They need something that says where edges begin and end. A gentle diagram unfurls. A grid like silk bends under a small weight. Then the weight grows. A galaxy cluster settles on the grid. Space curves as if it were a blanket on a winter bed. Starlight flows around the mass, and the path of the light becomes a loop, a lens, a halo, an Einstein ring. This is lensing on a grand scale. Now the diagram shrinks, and the curve becomes local, almost delicate. A coin tugging at cloth. A comet passing near a planet. A ship turning in a harbor. The small bending hints at a simple idea. Gravity shapes the root, and roots shape the story. If a wormhole is a port, gravity is not enough. The frame needs something rare exotic matter, with pressure that pushes where gravity pulls, a strange negative that keeps the throat from closing. The narrator does not rush. She names the pieces like seashells set on a windowsill. Throat, mouth, frame, stability. For a passage to hold, the geometry must resist collapse. The math says so. The models say so. The specter of time loops, and broken causality waits like a shadow in the corner. But the voice stays calm. We are not predicting miracles. We are checking beams and bolts. No prophecy, only careful tests. A telescope dome glides into view at dusk. The slit opens, and the mirror tilts toward a sky the color of deep water. Inside, a spectrograph hums. Starlight arrives from far away, sliced into rainbows. Every line is a note in a long song. Some notes shift just a little. Some arrive late by a heartbeat. The film glides from color to sound. A metronome clicks. A pulsar rotates in a distant nebula, its beam sweeping the dark like a lighthouse. Each sweep is precise, steady, almost stern. Pulse, pulse. These are the clocks that never sleep, their rhythm older than history. In the past, astronomers learned to trust these clocks. They built arrays that listened to many pulsars at once. The Earth rides its orbit, and the pulses arrive like mail delivered on time. When the timing is off by a whisper, it can be a sign. A wave in the shape of space itself may have rolled between us and the clock. A ripple from merging black holes, from heavy things settling into a quieter shape. The narrator reminds us, if a wormhole mouth passed across a line of sight, the pulse could shift, not smashed or scattered, but delayed, like sound passing through mist. A tiny, unexplained hold in a steady beat. An anomaly that asks to be read. The camera returns to the diagram. Galaxy lensing is the wide ocean. Local bending is a quiet cove. A port between stars, if it exists, is a throat in that cove. The film lays out simple tests. Track background stars near an asteroid field. Watch for their faint, repeating arcs. Compare their positions over months. If geometry wavers in a pattern not tied to known orbits, not tied to heat or dust or glare, write it down. Do it again. The tone is soft, but the rule is clear. Repeat, confirm, be sure. There is talk of rules of entry, the kind a port would require. The narrator's words are precise and gentle. Speed matters. Angle matters. The approach cannot be a wild guess. Imagine a ship guiding through a narrow channel at night. The buoys in place, the tide measured. A messenger would need the same. A trajectory set by physics, not by hope. The path must skim the edge of a throat, not plunge untested through its center. Probe the border. Measure the pressure. Read the light. The film shows an asteroid belt as a drifting shadow, rocks like old bones lit by a faraway sun. Between them, empty lanes. The camera glides closer to a shape that is only space a gap that looks like any other gap. Could a stable throat hide here, guarded by nothing but silence? The question stays open, like a window that never quite shuts. Nearby, a faint dust tail from a passing comet drifts, a silver thread in the dark. The dust's dance shows the wind of the solar system. If a throat bends space nearby, the patterns might warp in subtle ways. Not a sign screaming for attention. Just a gentle tilt, a soft curve of lines that should be straight. The documentary lingers on instruments. A cooled infrared camera that sees heat where eyes see none. A radio dish that hears whispers beyond hearing. A cold atom clock steadier than human patience. The screen displays simple meters. Noise. Signal. Noise again. Then, maybe a small rise. The voice explains the order of proof. Knock down ordinary causes, one by one. Bad weather. Solar flares. A glitch in the detector. A side lobe in the antenna. Only when the obvious falls away does the unusual remain. Even then, call it a candidate. Not a door. Not yet. We drift past the lab bench into the long memory of discovery. In the past, lenses in space were seen by chance, then mapped with care. In the past, pulsars were once little green men, then became tools. In the past, people thought canals cut across Mars. Later, they found dust and light playing tricks. Memory is part of science. Mistakes are gentle teachers. The narrator's tone is forgiving. She describes how each wrong turn trained the next careful step. The film turns to you, the watcher, for a moment. If you close your eyes, you can hear it. The steady beat of a pulsar keeping time. The low hiss of a receiver. The click of a shutter in a cold dome. You are not asked to believe. You are asked to feel the rhythm of patient work. The sleep-friendly pace returns. Each image lingers like breath on a window. Back in the dark, a set of guiding rules appears on the screen, almost like stars joined by lines. Build the frame and models. Search for small, consistent lensing near known orbits. Time the pulsars for tiny, repeating delays along paths that sweep past those same fields. Cross-check with different telescopes, optical, radio, infrared. Study the geometry at the edges, because edges tell the truth. The narrator calls this measuring the dream. We cannot step through it. Not yet. But we can measure its outline, the way a coastline is mapped by the sound of waves at night. In one quiet sequence, a piece of chalk moves over a blackboard. Number. Equations, just symbols that look like patterns in sand. A hand draws a throat like a flute's narrow neck. Next to it, a wide bay drawn as a galaxy lens. The chalk stops. The voice says, if the throat exists, it must stay open. That is the hard part. Gravity wants to shut it. Only exotic matter stranger than any rock or air could hold the frame. We do not have such material in jars. We have it in theory, a placeholder in the story. The camera accepts this without drama. The sea does not argue with the shore. A small spacecraft appears, only as an idea. It sits on a test stand under white lights. Sensors ring its hull like beads. A star tracker. A magnetometer. A laser ranging system that reads distance like braille. A spectrograph to taste the thin dust. A radio to whisper home. The narrator does not claim it will pass through anything. The narrator does not promise a greeting from the other side. The word used is simple and old. Messenger. Messengers go and return when they can. When they cannot, they still carry meaning. The path for such a messenger begins in sunlight. It starts with a burn near perihelion, a curve that uses the star's pull to steal speed, as clever pilots do. The trajectory threads the asteroid field along a lane where collisions are less likely and shadows are brief. The ship does not aim at a hole. It aims along the edge of an invisible possibility. The way a finger traces the rim of a glass to make it sing. If the geometry is odd there, if light bends, if dust curls, if pulses lag by a breath, the instruments will catch the pattern and send it back across the dark. We remain in the present, and yet time stretches. Stars hold their places. A nebula breathes. A distant exoplanet transits its sun like a small moth crossing a lamp. All of this continues, whether or not a port between stars waits among ancient rocks. The documentary settles into a reflective slowdown. We see people leaving the observatory at dawn, eyes tired, faces calm. Data will be checked later, after coffee, after sleep. The voice repeats the promise of method. Try, measure, repeat. Wonder is allowed, but only inside the lines drawn by proof. Now the image fades to a near black sea of space, and a single pulsar tick marks the minutes. The narrator asks a soft question, without leaning too hard. Could a stable throat exist, hidden amid asteroids, guarded by nothing but silence? The film holds that silence a moment longer than expected, the way a help note carries meaning after the sound is gone. There is no anthem here, no bright claim, only a map being drawn in the dark, one careful point at a time. If ports between stars are real, they will not shout. They will rest like harbors under fog found by those who learn the tide, read the wake, follow the slow swing of beacons. For now, the work is to listen, to watch for the small arcs where straight lines should be, to time the heartbeats of distant suns and hear when one breath runs long. The camera pulls back through the asteroid belt, past the dust, past the quiet lanes. The messenger, only a thought, waits on the edge of light. The voice lowers to a hush. We can't step through a dream, she says, but we can measure its edges. And as the last pulse fades into the night, the cradle of silence holds, carrying a question that lingers like a cosmic whisper, an opening not yet seen, but not quite gone. The plan begins like a brush stroke across the dark. Mission desires gather under soft lamps and a wall of star maps. They trace a path that bends with patience, a gravity assist to steal a little speed, a solar sail to drink sunlight like wind, and then a quiet drift into the belt where cold stones circle like old stories. They speak in careful voices. They move tokens across a board that looks like a game, but it is not a game. It is a way to guide a small messenger through the great room of the solar system. The spacecraft is not large, but it is precise. A camera peers through a baffled tube, tuned to the soft glow of starlight. A spectrograph waits for forbidden notes that should not be in the song of the sky. A magnetometer, long and slender, listens for the breath of the solar wind. Every part has a reason. Every gram has a purpose. Even the bolts, even the paint, even the way heat leaves the metal. Everything follows the trajectory the way ink follows a pen. The team has studied the anomaly for years. It appeared once, a drifting shadow that slipped across a field of stars, as if a gentle veil moved between us and a distant lamp. Then it was gone. Telescopes on Earth searched and searched. They found hints, like footprints in dust. The shape did not act like a comet. It did not glow like a nebula. It did not sit still like a patient rock. It came and went, almost shy. The data was thin, but it was enough to predict the time and an angle when the shadow might return. They set the probe's clock to that moment. They set their own hopes to it as well. The launch is quiet in its own way. A rocket rises on a pillar of white fire, and then the messenger is alone, weightless and steady. A gentle burn brings it near a planet for the gravity assist. The planet barely notices. Its curve fills the window for a few hours, and then it falls away. The messenger gains speed and slides inward, closer to the sun, where light sharpens and the solar sail unfurls like a patient wing. The film is thin. It trembles almost too softly to see. Sunlight pushes on it the way a breeze pushes on a spider's thread. There is no sound here, but there is pressure. It is enough. Day after day, the probe turns its face to the star. It rides that light, adjusting its trim with tiny motors that tap like moth feet. A small telescope checks the starfield for drift. The spectrograph takes a test shot of the sun's scattered glow, then looks away, saving its focus for later. The magnetometer hums at the edge of human senses, charting the solar wind's rise and fall, the way a chest rises and falls in sleep. Inside the probe, clocks agree and disagree in their careful ways. They speak across buses of gold lines. They disagree by microseconds, then find each other again. The system learns the rhythm of its own heart. It knows the temperature at every corner. It knows the tilt of the sail, the whisper of particles, the faint tug of gravity from rocks the size of cities. From rocks the size of houses, from dust as old as the first snow of the system. When the messenger reaches its drift, time slows. Not the time kept by the clocks, but the felt time. Status checks become ritual. Commands are short and rare. The craft holds station near a corridor of the belt that matches the predicted path of the anomaly. The cameras switch to watch mode. The spectrograph leans into the dark, looking for a pattern that was once called forbiddance, not because it is wrong, but because it does not fit. The magnetometer opens its ear to any ripple that says a mass has passed, or that the solar wind has been shaped by something with an edge. The team does not speak about miracles. They speak about margins. They speak about the angle of sunlight on the sail, and whether a small adjustment now will save a larger adjustment later. They speak about dull things in kind voices, clock drift, file compression, the best way to pack a day's data into a narrow band of radio. But under their careful words sits a softness, a fragile hope. They've sent a machine into a cradle of silence to meet a shadow that may only be geometry. If it is geometry, if it is a kind of light bending that fools the eye, the probe may feel nothing at all. It may only see. But seeing is enough. Night on Earth passes. Day returns. The probe does not notice. Its night is only a turn in space. The countdown shrinks. The predicted window approaches, wide at first, then tight as a thread. The camera warms to its task. The lens is clean. The baffles hold back stray light. The star tracker sets the frame with the patience of a painter. The spectrograph sets its bins like boxes on a shelf, ready to catch what falls. The magnetometer listens for a flutter, a small hiccup in the wind. A caution flows through the team like cool water. Many things can mimic a signal. Dust near the lens can resemble a drifting shadow. A bit flip can shape a false spike in a spectrum. Noise can make a line that looks like a rule. They have seen these tricks before. They know to test and test again. They know how easy it is to hear what you wish to hear. Risk is not only parts and power. Risk is the story the mind tells itself when the numbers are near a dream. Still, they aim the messenger with care. They place it where the lines cross, the predicted path of the anomaly, the safest corridor through the belt, and a line of sight that keeps the sun just outside the camera's shy vision. The sail is pulled in and trimmed. The craft becomes almost smaller, almost still. Its body faces the dark. Its instruments hold their breath. A flight controller reads the timeline in a slow voice. The words are simple. The meaning is deep. Open camera. Begin exposure. Start spectrograph. Magnetometer high rate mode. The probe obeys. It is a fortress of engineering tight seals, steady clocks, circuits that repeat themselves so that if one forgets, the others remember. Yet it moves through a cradle of silence so wide that a lifetime cannot cross it. It is both hard and soft at once. Stars drift across the detector. The software removes their constant light like someone lifting a veil, leaving the background open to anything that does not hold steady. The spectrograph stacks frames, building a picture of the night that is not a picture, but a list of colors and how strong they are. The magnetometer draws a line that bends like breath. In that line, wind speed changes as the sun flares and rests. On top of that, they search for something else, a ripple that says mass has passed between wind and watchman. Time, even now, does not hurry. The window opens. The probe watches. A tiny, dark touch reaches across the camera's field, so small that it could be a trick of the eye. But the software is not an eye, and it does not hope. It simply measures. The dip is real in one frame. It is gone in the next, then back again across a fraction of the field. A pattern begins to form, like a footfall heard across a floor. The team holds their breath and then lets it go. They do not cheer. They check. Is the star tracker stable? Yes. Did a cosmic ray strike the sensor? The flags say no. Did the sail shift? The gyros say no. The spectrograph's bins whisper a hint. A thin groove where light is thinner than it should be. At colors where nothing common should drink. It is not proof. It is not yet even a strong clue. But it rhymes with what was seen before. The magnetometer is almost bored. The solar wind is steady. If the shadow is geometry, there may be no touch, no push, no curl in the line. The line stays calm. Calm is also data. It says no mass brushed the wind, or the mass is gentle, or the distance is far. The messenger is patient. It keeps watching. Light bends in the presence of gravity. That is known. Light also bends in the presence of shape-thin veils, dust lanes, hidden rings, edges where no edges should be. The team thinks of these things but does not speak them aloud. They let the data collect. They let the machine do what it was made to do. Hold steady in the quiet and look. As the window narrows, the small dip becomes a small path. It maps across the field with a grace that suggests orbit or drift or some dance between. The spectrograph hears the same groove twice more. The second time is fainter. The third time is sharper and then gone. The magnetometer marks a breath, a tiny change as if the wind pressed itself against a corner and then moved on. It could be noise. It could be a clue. What do you do with clues in the dark? You don't shout. You don't rush. You write them down. You test them later against the memory of stars. You try to break them. If they break easily, they were never real. If they do not break, you look again from a different angle. That is the promise. That is the work. The messenger stores its frames. A narrow beam opens and sends the day's harvest toward Earth, a ray like a silver thread across the black. Hours pass. On screens in a quiet room, the images arrive. The lines form. People lean forward, then sit back, then lean forward again. No one speaks louder than a murmur. Some of them have been awake for too long. Some of them have learned not to count hours when the sky is speaking. Outside, the world turns. Night moves over towns. Cats watch windows. A child falls asleep with a book on the pillow. The messenger keeps its watch, a tiny point in a sea so wide that maps are only stories. Its sail is folded, its body is still, its instruments are clean and steady. It is a small thing doing a patient job. Not everything needs an answer tonight. The data is not a shout. It is a whisper. It is enough to ask better questions. Was the shadow a shape or a trick of light? Did a ring of faint dust pass between us and a distant star? Did an ancient travel across the field, so dark that it borrowed its outline from what it hid? Or is this something else, an edge of geometry we do not know how to name? Risk is walked beside the mission from the first sketch on the first napkin. Risk walks beside it now. But so does wonder. The designers knew this when they traced the trajectory with their calm hands. They knew that space is both hazard and shelter. They knew that a fortress can ride inside a cradle, and that a cradle can carry a message as old as starlight. Be patient, look closely, and do not fear the quiet. The window closes. The last frames stack. The beam to Earth tapers and ends. The messenger turns a few degrees to warm a panel and let the cold creep away from a seam. The clocks agree one more time. The wind breathes. Starlight washes the hull like a gentle river. If the shadow returns, the probe will be here again, waiting with its simple eyes and its steady heart. If the shadow was only geometry, then geometry has taught us something about how the sky folds and bends. If it was more than that, it will show itself again, not because we demand it, but because the solar system moves and time makes room for another meeting. In the deep, a tiny craft holds still among wheeling stones and old dust, listening for a cosmic whisper. Back on Earth, screens dim, chairs roll back, and tired hands rest. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of a question that drifts like a soft veil across the mind. The glow fades from the monitors, but in the fading hangs a thin, bright thread of awe, something delicate, something fragile, something waiting to be understood. Night holds its breath. A thin wind moves across sand and stone, and the sky opens like a giant book. In old days, people looked up and read its pages. A streak of fire burned across the dark, and someone called it a warning. A pale smear appeared and grew a tail, and someone called it a sign. Meteors were messages. Comets were prophecy. The heavens spoke, and the village listened. He stands at the edge of a field, the air cool, the ground damp. She sits on a flat roof in a desert town, the day's heat fading from the bricks beneath her. You lie in a quiet room, lights down, ears open to a soft voice. Above all of you, the same story passes. A small stone races along a trajectory it has followed for ages. A comet loops in a wide, faithful orbit. They are natural. They are simple. Yet the heart still hears the old whisper, harbinger, omen. Cultures shaped their calendars around the sky. Priests watched for a new star near a known one. Sailors steered by constellations. Farmers took the timing of rain from a bright cluster rising before dawn. When a comet appeared, fear and hope walked together through the streets. Some believed it meant a king would fall. Others believed it promised a birth. In fireside talk, the tail of a comet was like a finger pointing toward tomorrow. Science arrived with careful steps. It came with measurements and patient hands. It came with telescopes that caught more starlight than eyes alone could hold. It asked for the comet's speed, not its meaning. It plotted the meteor's curve, not its warning. A spectrograph split the glow and showed the hidden lines. Sodium here, cyanogen there. Dust and ice in a balanced dance. The sky's page could still be read, but now the letters were numbers. Even so, stories persisted. They did not lose to math. They moved beside it like two travelers on a long road. One set the distance. The other set the tone. A scientist in a dome at midnight listens to machines hum and fans whir. She adjusts the telescope, checks the trajectory, and smiles at a familiar comet that returns after decades. In the silence, she thinks of an ancestor who saw the same visitor without knowing its name. She thinks of the word omen, and she does not reject it. She simply folds it into the larger music of the night worm note among many. A grandmother in the desert hears of a shadow moving across the sky. She has heard rumors of a secret traveler, an object not yet named. It could be a fragment from the edge of our system or a messenger from beyond. She smiles, not worried. She has lived long with sky lore. She remembers a year when meteors came like rain and no misfortune followed. She remembers a comet that rose above the mountains and a new child who arrived healthy beneath its glow. For her, the sky's omens are not threats. They are companions. They mark time. They make the world feel connected. Somewhere else, a child stands at a window. The city dims. A cloud thins. A faint patch appears, a nebula like a gentle veil. The child points and whispers a wish. No one told the child to do this. The impulse comes from something deep and old. A nebula is gaslit by distant stars, simple in theory, beautiful in truth. Still, it feels like a soft ear that listens. It feels like a cradle in the dark. If the child's wish never finds that nebula, the act still matters. The wish lifts the heart. The sky receives it, or seems to, and that is enough for sleep. This film sits with both of them, the grandmother and the child. It honors the echo inside people when the sky changes. It also honors the tools, the telescope, the spectrograph, a careful logbook with its neat dated rows. Loneliness and wonder sit side by side on the bench. Numbers and stories share the same cup. The sound of a pencil on paper blends with the hush of desert wind. No one argues. The sky is wide enough to hold it all. Meteors once stood for war. Comet tails once stood for plague. Yet history also holds moments of kindness. In some places, a bright object meant good harvest. In others, a falling star meant a message from a friend who had passed on. People gave the sky their fears, but also their hope. In ruins and in libraries, we find both. We find drawings of blazing stones and notes on their paths. We find prayers and we find math. Astronomy's power is clear. It tests, it weighs. It follows a comet through a long arc and predicts the night it will return. It reaches across light years, measures the wobble of a star, and names an exoplanet by that tremor. It takes the glow from a nebula and teases out what it is made of. Hydrogen mostly, with a touch of helium, a trace of oxygen and carbon. It tells us what burns and what falls. It tells us what is hidden and what is passing by. Science gives the sturdy map. But stories give courage to walk the map at night. There is an object now whispered about a secret traveler. Some call it an anomaly. Some call it a messenger. It could be a simple rock shaped by time and cold. It could be a shard from a broken world. Or it could be something more strange, a thing that does not match our models. If it proves natural, the observers will be glad. Clarity calms the mind. Equations will be sharper. Predictions will be stronger. The orbit will settle into known terms, and the mystery will become a friend with a proper name. If it does not, all will deepen. The word omen will not return as fear but as question, a gentle one. What else moves through the dark that we have not met? What physics waits slightly beyond our reach? What tool must we build next? Wonder is not a threat. It is a lamp. It asks us to keep going. It walks a path under trees. Leaves hide most of the stars, but one bright one shines through. She listens to a radio that carries reports from a mountaintop. You rest with your eyes half closed while numbers are spoken softly, angles, brightness, time marks. The night has room for all three of you. The bright point above is older than your language, and yet your language reaches for it. This reaching is the human part. It makes even silence feel full. The documentary you hear does not choose between omen and orbit. It does not laugh at the past, and it does not bow to fear. It places the old beliefs gently beside the new facts and lets them breathe the same air. It remembers the way a comet's tail once brought crowds into the streets. It shows the way modern watchers gather too, though they gather around screens and data feeds. The glow is different, but the faces look much the same. Eyes tilted up, mouth slightly open, shoulders eased, a group held by a single drifting shadow. Across time, the sky has been teacher and mirror. When people feared, they saw warning. When people hoped, they saw promise. The sky itself offered both, even when it offered nothing at all but light and vacuum. Today, the watchers are kinder to mystery. They know that an unexplained signal is not a verdict. It is an invitation. They let the unknown be unknown for a while. They keep good notes. They share results. They sleep, then wake, then look again. In a deep valley, a small observatory hums. Its dome turns with a soft whir. A telescope tracks a faint blip. The spectrograph absorbs starlight and separates the wavelengths like threads pulled from cloth. The readout prints a clean line. The line is not dramatic. It is a whisper, just enough for the team to say, yes, there is something there. And yes, it is moving. They adjust. They compute. They do not rush. The sky works on long time. The heart can learn that pace. A story runs under the numbers like a low, steady drum. It says, once, people saw signs in the sky and were afraid. It says, now, people see signals and feel brave enough to ask careful questions. It says, we are still the same in some ways because we stand together and look up and wonder what it means. The grandmother's smile in the desert carries this drumbeat. The child's wish toward the nebula carries it too. The sound is gentle, like water under ice. No one knows how the secret traveler will be explained. Perhaps it is a shard from a long broken comet, polished by cold. Perhaps it is a thin plate of rock that spins and flashes, tricking our instruments just a little. Perhaps it is something we have not named. Data will arrive. The instruments will speak in soft tones, numbers, plots, faint lines on a screen. The fortress of silence that the night seems to hold will loosen a stone or two. A clue will fall into our hands. And still, even then, people will tell stories. They will tell them because stories help the mind drift across the dark without fear. They are like small lanterns carried at the edge of a field, or like cups of tea shared on a rooftop. Science does not take those away. It makes them steadier. It says, here is what is real. Stories answer, here is why it matters. Together they make a path a person can walk, even when the far horizon is hidden. So listen to the slow turning of the dome. Watch the comet's tail thin as it moves away. Picture the meteor that burns out before it meets the sea. Picture the nebula, a soft cloud that looks like breath on glass. In the quiet, feel the old words and the new ones settle side by side. Harbinger, orbit, omen, trajectory. None needs to win. Each points gently toward attention. Far above, the ancient traveler crosses a line of starlight and vanishes again. The night holds its breath once more. The wind smooths the sand. A child sleeps, a grandmother waits, a watcher keeps notes in a careful hand. The glow fades into the horizon, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. It begins like a tide that never hurries. Data rolls in, line by line, as if the deep has learned to breathe. The probe turns in its long arc beyond the bright lanes of the inner orbits. Its recorders hum. Its star trackers watch the same fixed lights, keeping time with patient beats. And on the screens, back at the distant station, the logs build a quiet seam of numbers, steady, calm, almost shy. Inside those numbers, something dips. Not once, not twice, but again and again, like a faint shadow passing across a clock face. The edges of each dip are smooth, clean as a drawn curve. Dust would smear. Debris would chatter. A comet would shout in gas and ice. Yet here the light only softens. It does not break. It does not color. It leans. The team had seen noise before. Random spikes, hot pixels, tiny storms of static. They had seen the signature of small fragments drifting between the probe and a star. A quick chop, a ragged bite, the mark of a pebble falling across a distant lamp. But this is not that. This is a slow bow, a gentle hush, a curtain that moves like thought. No gas cloud appears in the spectrograph. No halo wraps the path. There is no thin tail, no flare, no trace to catch. The probe samples space itself. Temperature holds. Dust counters remain quiet. The field looks empty, even to a careful eye. And yet the dips return like a soft refrain, always near the same angle, always near the same pace, as if the orbit of the unknown is not an orbit at all, but a shape the light must learn to cross. They call it a haze, but they mean something else. Not a visible glow, but a pattern that glows in the math. When the numbers are plotted, a faint aura gathers around the dips, a luminous suggestion that the path ahead is not simple vacuum. Geometry shows its hand. Lines bend where they should go straight. Beams curve as if a patient palm presses the air. The corridor is invisible to the eye, yet the starlight behaves as though it has brushed a quiet edge. Some whisper about lensing. Not the grand lens of stars, not the heavy grip of a black hole, but a smaller craft of space and form, something that makes a corridor by rule of angle and distance. A hallway that persuades light to lean. It could be gravity. It could be engineered. Refraction, like crystal ground at a scale the mind can barely hold. It could be both. Or it could be something the words have not met yet. The instruments do not answer. They only hum and send their tide. The station is calm. Voices are low, as if a loud word might startle the dips back into silence. Screens glow with arcs and bands. A clock counts the hours since the last pass, a small moon's worth of time. The probe turns again. The next dip arrives, smooth, gentle, true. It is like watching a breath from a sleeping giant, too deep to see, yet felt in the slow rise and fall of a blanket. They search for ordinary causes. They look for heat leaks in the sensor. They test the timestamps. They rotate the starfield and compare one patch of sky to another. Nothing fails. The hardware keeps faith. The software remains clear. The dips look the same in all the mirrors. They hold their shape, as if a careful hand has drawn them with one stroke every time. No dust, no gas, no debris, no tail. The list grows. What remains is the way of light itself, its habit of bending, its love of the straight line that is never truly straight. The corridor, if that is the word, does not block. It persuades. It does not dim the stars by stealing their shine. It nudges their beams to flow around the path as a river flows around the stone worn smooth by ages. The team steps back. The question grows larger than the graphs. If a corridor exists, made not of matter but of shape, who made it? Or did it rise the way dunes rise, through the slow work of uncounted winds? Is it the mark of an ancient traveler, laying a quiet road through the dark? Or is it the trace of tides older than planets, carving a passage in the fabric itself? The room grows still, full of wonder and careful doubt. The logs keep offering their gentle tide. The corridor's sign remains a whisper, never a shout. Proof lies just out of reach, as if behind glass. You can see the outline, but when you try to touch it, your hand meets your own reflection. There is comfort here, surprisingly. Uncertainty can be kind. It asks for rest, not panic. It says, let the night be night. Let the question breathe. If the door is truly there, it will wait. Doors do. They do not run. They do not flee. They hold their place until someone learns the handle and the hinge. So the work slows, not in fear, but in care. The watchers choose patience, like sailors who anchor at the edge of a fog, trusting that morning will redraw the coast. Two paths spread before them. The first is timing by pulsars, the clocks of the galaxy. Pulsars are steady drummers, spinning stars that tap the same rhythm across years and lifetimes. If a corridor bends light, it might bend those beats by the smallest of moments. A delay here, a hurry there. By listening to the tap of distant time, you might map the gentle swell of the hidden road. The second path is a deeper map of the belt, the wide ring of rock and ice that circles like the necklace of an old world. The belt holds shadows and old stories. It can hide objects thin as blades, long as winters, set to guide or guard. A better map, a braver survey, could test for shapes too narrow to see, lines that cut the glare of starlight just so. It would mean slow weeks of drift and measure. It would mean trusting the quiet over the flash. They weigh both. Pulsar timing is clean. It listens rather than looks. It is safe from glare and dust. But it needs long patience, and the corridor's touch might be so soft that even a perfect ear would miss it. The deeper map is bold. It sends the probe closer to places where pebbles fall like rain. It asks for careful steering, for constant check and check again. Yet it could show the line of the corridor in the pattern of occultations, the soft dips repeating at distances that make sense, not by chance, but by craft. For a while, they do neither. They breathe. The screens rest in a pale blue. The station lights dim to a late-hour hush. Someone leans back and allows the silence to explain itself. It does. It is a fortress, not of walls, but of listening. The fortress keeps nothing out. It keeps haste out. In that quiet, a new feeling rises, not the demand to solve, but the wish to understand, which is slower, kinder, and sometimes stronger. Memory runs backwards. They recall the first hint months ago, when a double star seemed to wink in a way charts said it should not. They recall how a comet's path, measured by 3 telescopes, lined up perfectly, and yet the light around it dipped in a curve, too soft for ice. Each piece now looks like a step toward a room whose door they only now begin to notice. Out beyond the station, the probe moves in a path set long before this night. Thrusters twitch. Panels turn to drink the weak sun. A camera opens and closes its eye with a small click that no one hears. In the black, the corridor, if corridor it is, remains invisible. It is a shape known only by the way other things behave beside it. It is a shadow without shade, a guide without a sign. The team sketches 2 plans. Plan A: begin a pulsar campaign at once. Choose a spread of bright, regular beaters across the sky. Register each pulse against the probe's clock, the station's clock, and the long clock at the observatory on the cold mountain far away. Watch for tiny drifts that match the probe's approach to the suspected lane. For weeks, they will listen to stars as if to drums inside caves. Plan B: rewrite the mapping run. Thread the probe through the belt with a net of sight lines. Observe field stars at exact times as the probe slides by. If the corridor edges are real, the dip should appear when the probe crosses their influence, smooth as before, but now in a pattern that traces a path, not a scatter. It will be like rubbing charcoal over paper to find the raised letters beneath. The 2 plans do not fight. They fold together, one in the ear and one in the eye. A calendar grows. Windows open and close. The station's day length becomes a soft rhythm of watch, record, breathe. When doubt comes, it is gentle. When hope comes, it is gentle too. The fortress of silence does not scold. It protects the work from hurry. You can almost feel the corridor in your own chest, a slight turning of breath, a sense of walking down a hall with the lights dimmed, where the floor is level and the walls are smooth, and there is no fear. Only a pause. Only the old truth that not knowing is the first real sign of learning. At last, a choice. They start with the pulsars. The listening can begin at once and does not risk the probe. The deeper map will follow when the timing has a story to tell. It may say nothing. It may say, lean a little to port at this mark. It may sing. Even if it is quiet, that quiet will teach them how much is too little and how much is just enough. The first pulses arrive like soft knocks at a far door. Beat, beat, beat. They line up the times. They compare the spread. They let the numbers breathe before drawing any lines. No one tries to force the shape. The corridor, if it exists, has shown it prefers patience. It will not come to a chase. It will come to a listening. Night folds over the station. The belts turn in their old orbits, old as stories told at fires. The probe is small against this wide stage, but small is not the same as weak. A seed is small. A lens is small. A door handle is small. In a room this large, softness is a kind of strength. They dim the screens to a restful glow. Logs trickle like a last tide across sand. The plan waits where plans do, in the steady hands of people who have chosen the slow light over the quick spark. The fortress of silence holds. It is not made of stone or fear. It is made of calm and time. Inside it, the work does not sleep. It dreams. Somewhere in that dream, geometry leans again. A beam bends where a beam should not. A dip smooths into a curve like the edge of an old coin. The data does not shout. It sighs. It almost seems to speak in a voice that is not a voice, reminding any listener who drifts close. If there is a door, it will wait. And in the gentle dark, the waiting feels not empty, but full of the soft promise that, even now, something hidden is learning how to be seen. The camera pulls back. First, the belt glows like a soft ring around a quiet sun, each granule of dust lit by patient starlight. Then the planets shrink to small beads, neat on their paths, circling with the steady rhythm of a lullaby. Farther out, the galaxy becomes a gentle swirl, a pale seashell in the dark. The voice is calm, unhurried. It reminds you that space is wide, and that even a whisper can travel a very long way. The anomaly remains nothing more than a drifting shadow at first glance. It crosses our instruments like a moth across a porch lamp, there and gone. Some call it a hidden messenger. Some say it is a beautiful error, the kind that appears when timing lines up just so. Either way, it holds the kind of question that makes people look up at night and listen. A small dip in starlight, a curve that does not match the model, a pause in the radio hiss that feels too even, too clean. It could be chance. It could be noise. Yet it could also be a note in a larger song. The narrator speaks of patience. Not the heavy kind, but the soft patience of water polishing stone. In the past, comet hunters waited whole winters for a tail to rise over the ridge. They tracked orbit after orbit, sketching positions by hand. Their notebooks smelled of dust and ink. Their breath turned white in the night air. Later, astronomers guided the first spectrograph across the sky, splitting starlight into thin rainbows so they could read what the atoms were saying. They learned the language of hydrogen and iron, the slight tug of motion, the secret of a star's age. Time was the main tool. Time and careful eyes. Today, telescopes do the watching for us, but the patience is still ours. Machines stare without blinking. They see the tiny tilt in a planet's trajectory and the faint flicker from a distant exoplanet crossing its sun. They measure until a pattern rises like a tide. The anomaly sits inside this sea of numbers. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a single brushstroke where a blank line should be. To study it is to slow the breath and ease the shoulders. To study it is to accept that wonder sometimes speaks with a very small voice. The camera coasts past a dark nebula, a cloud so thick it looks like velvet. Stars form behind the curtain, hidden but busy. They're like not yet strong enough to break through. Here, too, the voice reminds us that the universe works in quiet. Dust gathers. Gravity waits. A future sun is being shaped grain by grain. The same is true for ideas. A question is born. It grows in a corner of the mind and waits for the right night, the right data, the right friend to ask the right second question. A fragile question can make you brave because carrying it means you must go looking. Imagine a researcher in a small control room. The walls hum softly. Coffee cools beside a keyboard. A graph crawls across the monitor. Starlight recorded in thin lines. A faint dip appears, then returns to normal. The researcher does not leap to a conclusion. They mark it, compare it, run the checks that catch the usual ghost bad pixels. Passing satellites, a cosmic ray that blinked in the wrong place. The dip stays. It is still small. It is not proof, but it asks for company. Soon, another telescope looks. A third tracks the same patch of sky, its mirror turning like a slow thought. Signals are shared across oceans. Teams write notes at dawn, at noon, at midnight. The question gathers people. Once, long ago, a ship found a new coastline by following birds. The sailors saw a gull and hoped land was near. Our birds are different now. They are changes in brightness, sudden lines in radio noise, arcs in a trajectory that should be straight. We do not steer by them, but we pay attention. The anomaly is such a bird. It flies across the screen and is gone, and we wonder if, somewhere ahead, there is a shore not marked on our maps. Skeptics help more than they know. They remind us of history, of the false alarms and the eager mistakes. They talk about the time a detector blinked because of a warm cable, the time an echo from Earth bounced off the moon and came home as a mystery, the time a comet's coma fooled a sensor and looked like a signal. They ask for better timing, better calibration, longer watching. The voice agrees. Patience is a kind of love for truth. It does not fear being wrong. It fears only not looking long enough to learn. We have learned to listen in many ways. Some telescopes watch for the dimming of stars to find exoplanets that pass in front of them. Others look for the tug on a star's motion, a wobble that means a planet is near. Radio dishes listen for patterns that do not appear in nature sequences too neat, too regular, like a clock tapping out numbers. X-ray eyes search the hot hearts of galaxies. Infrared eyes see the heat of newborn worlds. New instruments stitch these colors together. A picture forms slowly, pixel by patient pixel. If the sky holds a door, it will not be a single bright shape. It will be a set of clues that line up so cleanly they feel like a hand opening. The voice moves with care, like a guide in a quiet museum. Here's the belt again, a soft glow around the star, dust like powdered moonlight. Here, the planets resume their measured orbits, steady as breathing. The anomaly drifts at the edge, a shadow that does not match the known paths. Maybe it is a cold fragment from a shattered comet, sliding on a long loop. Maybe it is a crackle from a distant pulsar, warped by gas as it passes. Maybe it is the artifact of two measurements crossing at a bad angle. Or maybe it is a messenger, a harbinger from a place we have not mapped. The voice does not choose. It lays the options like stones in a stream and lets you walk across them at your own pace. Hope is quiet here. It has no trumpet. It is the soft confidence of engineers reworking a sensor so it can catch a fainter flash. It is teams trading code, testing it on messy data until the noise falls away. It is mission planners making room for one more observing window 5 minutes tucked into a schedule that is already full. It is a student learning to hold a spectrograph's calibration steady across a cold night, watching the lines of oxygen and sodium and hydrogen anchor like notes on a staff. Each small act is a vote that the universe is readable. Each adjustment says, try again. We dream in the cradle of silence. Night carries the sound of distant traffic, of a fan turning, of breath in the next room. Out beyond our roofs, the background of space hums with the leftover light of the Big Bang, stretched thin by time. Against that ancient murmur, the anomaly is a single ripple. To hear it, we have to be gentle with ourselves. We slow the story. We let the questions arrive in their own order. If you find your eyes heavy, that is all right. People have always learned while half asleep, old sailors listening to waves to guess the weather, farmers waking to the soft wind and deciding if rain would come. Your drifting mind can hold a map that your waking mind will read in the morning. The future leans closer. More telescopes are coming, mirrors polished to catch weaker glows, instruments cooled until their own heat can no longer shout over the sky. There will be better timing, tighter coordination, a web of watchers spread across deserts and mountaintops and quiet valleys where radio noise is kept away. Spacecraft will take their places far from Earth, so our own chatter does not drown the subtle songs. Someday, A signal may arrive that is crisp enough to touch, not with a hand, but with shared certainty. It will step through the checks, survive the doubts, and still be there, steady as a heartbeat. If the sky holds a door, we will not find it by knocking. We will find it by listening. We will read the flight of comets and measure the shifts in orbits. We will study the faint light inside a nebula and the way a star spectrograph says it swallowed something rocky long ago. We will compare and test and compare again until a pattern stands where chance would wobble. And then, if a message waits, we will hear it not as a shout, but as an agreement between many quiet truths. For now, the camera keeps pulling back, giving space to the scene. The swirl of the galaxy dims, and the constellations look like stitches holding night together. On the edge of one stitch, the drifting shadow lingers. A hidden messenger, a beautiful error. A small reminder that even in a well-mapped sky, there are places for wonder to live. The voice lowers to a whisper. Destiny is not a straight road, it says. Destiny is a field where patient questions bloom. In homes and labs, in domes that open like pale flowers, observers glance one more time at the screens before they sleep. Files save. Lenses rest. The belts and planets keep their courses. The anomaly waits in the raw data, unchanged by our hope, untouched by our doubt. It is simply there, asking to be seen again when the sun is on the other side of the world. As you drift into sleep, let the thought be easy. Let the quiet be kind. The night carries your breath and the breath of ancient stars. And somewhere, a small curve in a line keeps a promise to return. Remember, the mystery remains. The glow fades toward the horizon, but in that fading, it holds a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. And in the drifting quiet, one can almost sense that another secret is about to reveal itself.